Which button? Okay. I get right there. All right. I actually should we get started while we're tweaking that? Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Great. Welcome back. So we're adjusting some of the technology for our live streamers. So anyway, we'll go and kick off here. Welcome back from lunch. So that was fun, and thanks again for arranging that, Karina. I really appreciate it. So I get to introduce somebody we all met this morning on our panel. It's the first time for me meeting her in person, so it's been great. So I get the privilege of welcoming Dr. Susie Kelso. I didn't know doctor. So and I love your title, Chief Potential Officer. I didn't catch that earlier. Best title ever. And you made that up? That's awesome. So she's going to present on a topic, and I love this. What is wrong with you is the title. Needed that emphasis. And so please join me in a warm welcome to Susie.
For those of you who think that having your doctorate makes you full of yourselves, I have two sons who said it stands for DER. So I don't use it a lot in banking and higher ed. It was a requirement. But in banking, you just kind of play it down because people don't think it's that big a deal. Think of a situation you've been in lately. Maybe it was Easter holiday, maybe Christmas, where you were around a bunch of people, possibly family and friends, and you looked at people around you and you asked yourself, what is wrong with you? Now, if you're with family, you may have even said it out loud. You can think it, but you think, what's wrong with you? Why would you behave that way? Why would you say that? Why would you do that? And sometimes it happens at work as well, where there's somebody who may irritate you kind of mildly, kind of simply, but I'd like to hear from the people in this room who have not had one of these behavior style profiles or something else. So Myers-Briggs was one of the first ones I heard about. Colors training, where you were a different color. DISC seems to be really popular in the business world right now. People skills is what we do at our company, and it's just a version of that. I've heard that there are behavior styles of birds, animals, cereal. Is there anyone in this room, if you'd raise your hand, who has not done any type of behavior style profile? So you're familiar with the concept of that, and I'd like to share with you what we did at Bank Midwest. Think of people at work, friends and family, that when they talk or do or say certain things, they maybe mildly irritate you. And that's her. Mildly irritate, just, and then there are people who you'd really like to hurt. And it's consistently, they do and say things, and you think to yourself, what is wrong with you? And so those are the people I'd like you to think about in terms of whatever behavior style system you talked about. Instead of thinking about people being wrong, instead of what's wrong with you, when we go through our training, and in this amount of time we may not get there, but when we go through the training, we'd like to say maybe they're just different. So if you could get people from thinking of others as going from wrong to being different, you've done something. If you really hit it out of the park, you can say, not only is nothing wrong with them, I need them. I need them around me. I need those differences. And it's a whole shift in context about how we look at people. The people skills concept is really know thyself. And I appreciated the references earlier about emotional intelligence, because we're going to make a link to that. But also know others. So become aware of yourself and others. How can you flex so that people can have more of a win-win situation? And how do you build trust and respect among your team, among the people you work with, who are different, who have different styles, who are naturally different? And so these styles in people skills will be familiar to you who have had DISC. A lot of you, I recognize that. These are the styles, we call them, the quadrants are the same. They just have different names. I'd be curious when we're done with this, if we could see what kind of profile we have in this room in terms of the different kinds of styles that show up in a training out of a bunch of trainers. I would expect we'd be a little different than the typical group. The first style, the controller style, is really the results. Boy, they like focus, they like to be in control, they use conflict, they just are the goers. Come on, let's go. They take charge. Their blind spot, though, is listening, because they're always in a hurry. They want to be in control. They think they're right. They think they know it, and they move. They even walk. You can tell a controller is coming at you, and if you had a parent who was a controller, you could hear him, and you knew something was about to happen. Controllers move fast. They walk fast, they talk fast, they take charge, and they say their opinion as facts. And what they don't do is listen very well, because they've got ideas and they want to get things done quickly. What they want from the people around them is action. Just do something, even if it's wrong. Come on, let's go. The next style we'll talk about we call persuaders. That would be the I in DISC. The D was the first one. Persuaders, I'm an extreme persuader, off the charts. A lot of persuader in me. I like people. Driving need is to be liked. The greatest strength is verbal skills. And the blind spot is following systems. And I have proof of that, because I am so old that I was not allowed to wear jeans to school when I was in high school. So during picture day, I went and put on a pair of jeans and sat in the front row of a large group on the bleachers and crossed my legs with my jeans on and said, we should be able to wear jeans. So don't follow systems. I would also mention other persuaders out there, and a lot of presenters, a lot of trainers are persuaders. Not a lot of attention to detail. So do you know there's another DoubleTree Hilton? Guess where I was yesterday? I was at the airport, and I gave my driver a really nice tip. And I thought, to bring me to the wrong place. But that's another issue, not big on details. Really want from others approval and praise. A year ago, I won the best hat at a Kentucky Derby party at our golf course. And it had bourbon bottles hanging. It was because two horses had the name bourbon in it. So I had little bourbon bottles. I had a sash with bourbon in it. and I won the hat contest, except the guy in charge forgot to announce it. That kills a persuader. We kind of want credit for things, we want attention. So that's my style to kind of an extreme. The next group are also S's in DISC, but it's the stabilizer. These are the people, the majority of the people that work with us, I would say 60 to 70% of our people are stabilizers or S's in our bank. They focus on relationships, but they want security. They want to know what's going on. They want everybody to be happy. They're the ones with the candy on the desk. They're the ones who take care of things. And they have a blind spot of initiating quickly because they're so busy considering other people and what's going on. And they also want to do things right. What stabilizers want from you is appreciation, but not the giant with a big trophy on the stage like persuaders want. They want you to tell them what they do that impacts the work. They don't want to be on the stage. And so a lot of us have support people working for us who are stabilizers. They're there to help. They're there to serve. So many support people are. So how do we acknowledge what they want for appreciation? And then the fourth one is the analyzer style. That is quality, accuracy, and perfection. These are your finance people. These are your audit people. These are the compliance people. And what they want to do is get it right. They use facts, data, and history. What they can't do is declare a position. That's where analysis paralysis came from, is analyzers overanalyze. So this is when a persuader will say to an analyzer, what's wrong with you? Let's go with this program. And an analyzer will say, how much is it going to cost? Who has done it before? How many people have had good luck with this? What's the date on it? What's the facts? What's the history? And so those are our four styles. If you would talk to somebody next to you, tell them which one of these is your primary style, if you would. So just turn to somebody and talk about it. Who are you in these four? Okay, thank you. Here's what's interesting about this. I'd first be interested in seeing, based on just this quick review, and since all of you have had some form of this, how many of you would put yourself in the controller category? Wow, a lot of controllers. Go, results, get things done. Okay. How many persuaders in the room? More than normal. Yes, my people. So nice. How about stabilizers? Okay, kind of mid-range there. And how about analyzers? So many less than at a regular banking conference, because so many bankers are quality, facts, data, accuracy, perfection. Here's what we'll talk about with these styles, though, is that there are two things that make us have conflict, and it'll have conflict within your team, and it'll have conflict within your friends and family. And that is that this side, the analyzers and the persuaders, have a need for speed, fast. Drive fast, walk fast, talk fast, get things done. Now, yesterday, when do you want it? Let's go. Some of us have been known to, even at a stoplight, try to be the first one off the line. And I just have a little Mitsubishi. I don't have, I still like to beat people off the line. There's something about speed. My husband keeps saying, why do you always have to go so fast? And I just don't know. It's just churning. So this side has a need for speed. Analyzers and stabilizers are the measure twice, cut once people. They say, slow down. Let's talk to more people. Let's check this out. Could we do it right? Maybe look up the address of the hotel you're going to. Could happen. Also, when it comes to emotions, what's a little different here is the top ones, analyzers and controllers, are a little bit tighter with their emotions. They control their emotions more, and they really don't let a lot of people in. The responsive ones, the persuaders and stabilizers, you know more than you maybe want to know about what they feel, what they think. It's all over their faces. They can just tell. There are also two other pieces. These top two, analyzers and controllers, it's about the task. Let's do the task. Let's get it done. We've got work to do. We've got a project. These folks, stabilizers and persuaders, it's about the people. Yes, we're going to do ITMs, but what does that mean for our staffing? What does it mean for our retail folks? They were more concerned about that than how fast that would make service for the customers. So these have some conflicts because this side wants to move fast. This side is saying, take your time and slow down. So people at work who want to slow down, do it right because we have an audit coming up and they want to take care of it. These people over here are saying, what's wrong with you? Speed up. And they're saying over here, what's wrong with you? Slow down. So it causes conflict across a lot of venues. So you have the controller who's emotionally controlled and wants to do things fast. The persuader wants to do things fast, but it's about people. The stabilizer, about emotions and results. They're willing to show it. Analyzer, let's follow the process and let's be very controlled in what we do. Oops, what did I do? I hit something here. There we go. So there it is, we're back. So here's some challenges. We had someone walk through our office place earlier last spring and said, there is a cocktail reception at Captain's Getaway. It's a rooftop bar close to the lake. Our bank is sponsoring drinks and food for our customers, and we've invited our customers. Somebody comes to me and said, could you go to that? For work? Could I go to that? You eat, you talk, you drink. What is wrong with that? And so I'm thinking, and what time do you need me there? And they said, well, we're going to start at 4, but could you be there at 3:30? Yes, I can be there. I'll be there at 3 if you need me to. So I'm all excited. I'm going to this, and I had one of my coworkers come by and said, we have to go to this thing. And all I could think of is, you don't want to go to Captain's rooftop? No, I don't. Why not? Well, you have to talk to people. And of course, what came to my mind, what is wrong with you? How could you have free food and drink, get to talk with people on company time as part of your job? Are you nuts? And so you start realizing that this is somebody, guess which one of these categories that person would fit into? Very much so. Analyzer. He had work to do. He isn't going to share a lot. It's hard for him to be around people. He's awesome at what he does technically, but it isn't about people. He's got work to do. He said to me, listen to this, persuaders, you won't believe it. They want me there at 4 o'clock. I said, I'm going to 3. So here he's looking at me saying, what's wrong with you? And I'm looking at him, same question. And that's in general where our conflicts lie, where we come across people who have a different natural style. It's just who we are. We get to be who we are. So the persuader then decides that's a fun thing. The stabilizer likes it, but is very careful about who they talk to. Now, here's an interesting piece. The conflict happens on the diagonal. So the persuader style, or what would be the I style, has the most conflict with analyzers. And it makes sense. Here's what's really crazy. We also marry diagonally. 90% of the people that People Skills have researched have married. My husband is an industrial engineer who reconciles his checkbook. I am a teacher who estimates about 20, down to the penny. That explains conflict, but how in the world does it explain attraction? Isn't that something? And so he wants me to pay more attention to detail. I want him to, take the stick out once in a while. I mean, just relax. And so I think maybe nature might put us together. You think of how stabilizers and controllers have problems. Why does that make sense? Why does it make sense that a controller and stabilizer would conflict?
Controller has all the answers, stabilizer wants to.
Yes, controller has all the answers, stabilizers want a consensus. Controller wants to go, stabilizer wants to take time. These also often marry each other. Doesn't it make sense? A controller finds a good stabilizer partner. I'm going to tell you what to do the rest of our lives. And you know what? You're going to go along. Now, the longer we're married, you might get a little irritated once in a while, but you'll still acquiesce because that's what stabilizers do. And controllers love it. Make a decision. And you ask stabilizers sometimes, how do you let your partner be so bossy with you? And they go, just let him make decisions. I don't want to worry about that. They like it. That's hard for us over here on this side to understand. Why? Why would you let somebody do that? So there's this odd conflict, and then there's this attraction that people diagonal from us cause us our biggest challenges. And so that's one way of looking at it. There's also the concept that one of the reasons I pick People Skills over all the others, and I'm also a trainer for DISC because Graduate School of Banking picked DISC, so we do DISC in part of that program. The reason I picked People Skills is they were heavy on intent versus impact. So they said, we all get up in the morning and nobody says, gee, I think I'll hurt maybe 3-4 people's feelings today. Or I think I'll irritate that analyzer that I work with. We get up and we all have good intentions. What we have to get used to owning is the impact we have. So we stand on our intent, but I didn't mean to do that, but here's the impact. When I was a dean of education, I thought, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and be one of the team. And I'm going to show them that this job isn't above me, and I'm going to work with them. And what do you suppose the feedback was that I got? I'm in there. Pardon me? Let us do our job. You are micromanaging. Don't you trust us? Okay, I guess I trust him. Let him go. Let him work on it. Guess what feedback I got? Don't you care about what we're doing at all? My intent in both cases was good, to get involved and help, but I have to own the impact. You, as your certain style, sometimes stabilizers, I know you're being quiet and you're being careful and you're trying to go along with everything, But what's the impact of a room full of stabilizers not talking about stuff and agreeing with the last person who spoke? Nothing gets done. Your voice is not heard. And so because stabilizer's big thing is avoiding conflict, I often say, if you can find a stabilizer who can find a way to address issues directly and honestly and see it as a gift to people, you can have an amazing leader. But the way people look at you sometimes is, don't you have a thought? No, I'm just nodding with what everybody said because I want to get along. I want people to not bring things up. I know stabilizers who get physically sick when there's issues where people have a little heated discussion, and they will literally feel sick about it. And we're over here on this side just kind of fighting it out. Here's one of the key points. We measure ourselves by our intent. We judge others by their impact. And so what we have to do is start paying attention. So when I realize that I just told a joke and I just offended somebody, my intent was to make you laugh. The impact might have been that I just offended you. And if I do that, I have to own it and say, I'm sorry, that was not my intent. It's a very powerful concept, and I think it fits into leadership that we're talking about. It fits into assuming the best about people, that everybody's out there trying to do the best they can. So what we ask of people is, could you flex a little bit? So if you are a stabilizer analyzer, this is your zone. You can move pretty comfortably into the analyzer area, the stabilizer area, but it's hard for you to move over and act like people on this side, and it's impossible for you to go over to these areas, especially when you're under tension. And so we have someone like a controller persuader, which is kind of close to my piece. I can go around these styles. I can flex to do that. Work a little harder to get there. It's almost impossible for me to get over to this side. And I will show you what we did and the impact on just what this visual is. We had an insurance leader who was laissez-faire. He was a stabilizer. He would not deal with anything. He didn't deal with issues. He didn't supervise. He said, you know what, they're salespeople. If they don't go out and make money, that's up to them. And he just let them go do their thing. In order to compensate when they let him go because he wasn't getting results, they hired a controller. Guess what happened? Blew their hair back. She was going to go. We're doing this. We're doing policies. And these folks here just said, whoa, wait a minute. We just had no supervision. Now we got, double C here. Oh, no. Controller. At least it wasn't a double D. That would have been worse. That's in DISC. It's a double D. Yeah. And she actually had to have this conversation. We had this picture where she had to get the sense, you are working with a majority of stabilizers who are used to doing everything on their own and everything calm and everything's fine. And now you're saying new policy, new procedures, here we go. And they just dug in. And so that was the visual that helped us do that. And what we'd ask is that if you know your style, every once in a while, you have to flex. You have to maybe move a little bit to the center to get along better with somebody who's way across from you. So you do that situationally, intentionally, and temporarily. You cannot go there. As a matter of fact, in people skills, we call it tipping the iceberg. I didn't do the whole iceberg thing because of time. But think of people who are in jobs that are not natural for what their style is. They are tipping their iceberg all day. And some of us have had jobs where you go home exhausted because you aren't being natural. You aren't using what your gifts are. So what we ask is that every once in a while, every month, I have to fill out this credit card information, like receipts and everything. Now, I do it because I like having a credit card. But I have to tip my iceberg to get that done. And every month, Steph from payroll calls and says, "You're missing a receipt." And I will say, "Can you help me with this?" But do I like filling that out? No. Do I do it? I do. Tip my iceberg for a little bit. I'm normally kind of loud. I like to have fun. But when I go to a funeral, sometimes I can rein it in. But it's called just absolutely, but you do it situationally, intentionally, and temporarily. You can't live there. You have to genuinely be who you are. And so once you know this, once you have a sense of what your style is, now you have a choice. My husband wants me to record checks that I write in a register. I know he wants me to do that. I can either decide to do it or not. If I decide to record the checks in the register, I will meet his need, and that will have a positive impact on our trust and respect. And I get to share my talent, skills, and expertise, and we both win. I stretch a little bit, I meet his need, and I do what he wants. I, however, can say, I choose not to register that. And then our tension reaction behavior kicks in. And we have instinctive and reactive to, you didn't put this in the checkbook. And we have a big conflict about who does the checkbook and where'd the money go this month and all those conversations. And pretty soon the relationship deteriorates and spirals because I chose not to do what I knew he wanted. You have people around you every day, either personally or professionally, who need something different than what you need. And because they need something different, it doesn't make them wrong. And you have a choice when you know that they need that to give them what they need. We had somebody filling in as a vice president when I was a dean, and he wanted me to, we met every week. And he said he was a controller, analyzer, and he said, "Susie, when you come into my office, be bright, be quick, and be gone." And that's not typical. And he said, "By the way, bullet points. If you can be in and out in 10 minutes with your bullet points, that'd be good." That was him telling me what he needed. Is that natural for me? No, I want to sit and talk. I want to go into more depth. But to meet his need, I would do that. I'd go in with bullet points, and it actually was good for me. Be a little more concise. You don't have to go on so much and so long about that. So you have a positive impact. You can flex, but think about your team members. What kind of team do you have? What are the styles of the people on your team? And there's someone really struggling who maybe if you met their needs once in a while, things would turn around. And not only is it your job as a leader to meet their needs, but then you can tell them, "Hey, I'm a persuader. Here's what I need." I think it's getting in touch authentically with who you are and being comfortable with that. So I think the whole concept is know thyself, understand who you are. And the other thing I loved about People Skills over DISC was they celebrate that. What you are is awesome. It's exactly what you should be. And you should be excited to be what you are just naturally. And then know others as well. We heard emotional intelligence mentioned a few times, and this is where this weaves in here, I think, is if we say, doing these kinds of styles makes me self-aware. But what about self-regulation then as another emotionally intelligent piece? So example, my friend Molly and I are both persuaders in a 9-person book club. We were writing to book club one time, and Molly said, "It's a good thing we're in this book club because they would be so bored." They're a pretty boring, quiet group of people, except us, who are loud and possibly talk about books we haven't read. Now, once I became aware that we maybe possibly talk more than we should and hijack conversations, maybe take them over, What can I do? An emotionally intelligent person will what? Shut up. Because that's what all those wonderful stabilizer people would tell us. Not, gee, we're glad you're in our club because it wouldn't be fun without you. They want to say, shut up. Quit talking so much. Let other people talk sometimes. So self-awareness leads to self-regulation. Now I can appeal to people. Quit talking so much. Ask somebody a question. What did you think about that? It's very hard. It takes energy to be different, but you can do it. And you can build relationships by controlling the things that you naturally do. Stabilizers, speak up, although it's uncomfortable. Say what you think. Analyzers, come out of that. Speed up a little bit once in a while. Quit analyzing it to death. Controllers, slow down and wait for people and listen. And persuaders, pay attention to details. And although we can all get better, I love the strengths-based mentality. So if I'm a persuader and I know details aren't my friend, I hire people around me who make trains run on time and who love that stuff. The things that makes my eyes glaze over, my support network, those are the people who I would hire to be around me to say, help me do better at what I'm not good at, and let me honor what you do well. So let's plus our pluses and spend less time trying to fix our weaknesses. So that's part of it. The other thing is then there's nothing wrong with you. You are different than maybe what I am, but I need those kinds of people in my life. And if we get teams that start thinking like that in terms of accepting that difference, and because I'm going to want to hire somebody just like me, and that would be a mess. You need people, you need that variety, you need that difference. So how can we apply, all of you've had some kind of behavior styles, how can we apply it? How about just learn to be authentic? It's one of our values, but how about just say, you know what? I know the downside of being a persuader, but that's what I am. So I've got to just do the best I can with that and mitigate the pain. How about working to build trust and respect? And how do you do that? You honor the other people who are different from you and tell them, I tell my administrative assistant, what would I do without you? Here's what you did, and here's what stabilizers really want. Here's what you did for me, and here's the impact it had. Here's what it allowed me to do because you did what you did so well. The other thing is start thinking about when things go wrong, instead of what did you do? What did those people do? There they go again. They screwed up again. They didn't do this. How about saying, what can I do? And focus on yourself. What can I do? Maybe I wasn't clear. What can I do? This is a quote from Glasser that I wish was hanging at every one of our locations. Happy people constantly evaluate themselves. Unhappy people constantly evaluate others. If you think when you're the unhappiest, it's probably when you're saying, well, there she goes again. Boy, that irritates me. When you find yourself gossiping and backstabbing about people, you should probably be talking with them and not about them. And maybe take that opportunity to say, what can I do in this situation? Not, there they go again. Anybody can collect evidence of what other people do wrong. It's a lot more challenging to say, here's a situation with someone we don't get along that well. Wonder what I can do. Wonder if I can talk less. I wonder if I can pay more attention to the details. I wonder if I can try harder. And then that gives you control, and you'll be a lot happier. So go be happy. That's it.
Awesome. Great. I think a minute for a question or so. Anybody have a burning question? Nope. One question back here.
That was my lunch mate. He's setting me up here.
You knew I was coming in hot.
I knew you were coming in hot. I saw you.
I just want to know, can you share the deck with us, because that's a great deck.
Oh,
it's great stuff. Going to be able to use this at work, but I also wanted to thank you for saving me thousands of dollars in marriage counseling. So
there you go. I know you married your diagonal. I know you did.
All right, great.
And the decks are available.
Oh, so I just wanted
Should
to
we-
add that we will send out a link within a week with all the presentations. So you'll get an email from me saying that here's the link, here's the login, and
Awesome.
so you'll get everything.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there since
Okay,
we're
wrap it up there.
tight with time. Thank
Okay.
you so much. And
Thanks.
obviously, she'd be happy to talk to you at a break, I'm sure. Thank you. All right. Thanks again. Well, quick reminder before we introduce our next presenter, I do want to just make another plug for the survey. So just a quick reminder to take a moment, maybe while you're doodling or so, while you're listening, take a moment to provide some feedback. That comes in handy for sure. So I get to welcome another presenter. We had a panel this morning. Another panelist, Kirsten's going to come back up, and she is currently leading, as she talked about this morning, a leadership development program with MetLife, and has, in a recent role, had charge of professional development. And so this is a newer role. So you're going to come and talk to us a little bit about your program, The Future of Work. So welcome to Kirsten. Yay.
All right, great. Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. You know, I just want to start. Susie, I loved your talk. Thank you so much. Quick story before I get into my slides. So when I started with behavior profiling, we used birds. Have you heard of birds? Yeah. So birds, it's doves, owls, peacocks, and eagles. Okay. So now if you put those together into an acronym, okay, doves, owls, peacocks, eagles. So I got into my first leadership meeting and I'm like, all right, well, we're going to do something really fun. We're going to take the DOPE test. I think that was the last time they asked me to administer that one. My boss was like, no, it's the birds test. It's not the DOPE test, Kirsten. Anyway, so today what I want to talk to you a little bit about is just what we're doing at MetLife for preparing our current talent for the future of work. I'm going to just share a little bit about why this happened last time. Like the slides are changing down here, but not. Please hold one moment. Share a little bit about what we're doing at MetLife. Well, it worked. Here. Is it this one? Is it that? Okay. We went down here. Let's try. It's not changing up there though. I swear we practiced this morning. So while they're figuring that out. So there's two programs that I wanted to share with you. One is on Workforce of the Future, which is our program across MetLife for all of our associates. And this was put together really how do we develop our talent for the future? So we did a lot of research on what are the skills that every associate needs in order to be successful in the future. And then thank you so much. So that's the program for everyone. And then Leading the Future is our leadership development program. So instead of getting into the details of the design and what's actually included in these programs, I wanted to take you through three of the enablers for our program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing with experimentation, engagement, as well as some of the metrics that we've used to track our performance. So the first here is on experimentation, and this relates to our Workforce of the Future program. A little bit about this program. This is completely online, okay? So we'll have topics such as emotional intelligence. We work with our associates. We also have a strategic relationship with GP Strategies to hold think tank sessions to really understand what are the problems that we're trying to solve. Create online content that people can access through through an online platform, whether it's curated articles, whether it's items that we're developing ourselves. But what we found is that we weren't getting the engagement that we wanted. It's an optional program, and if people weren't finding the value for themselves to engage with the program, they're not going to take advantage of it, right? If their leader isn't out there saying, hey, this stuff is really important and I'm going to make time in your day for you to complete, they weren't completing it. And working in the center of the organization, it was very difficult to market the program and really figure out, well, what can we do to increase engagement? So what we did was we started to experiment. We went out to our enablers. We went to various countries and lines of business to say, look, you as learning professionals on the ground, we need your help. We need to understand what's going to work for your specific line of business or for your country as far as engagement goes. You know what the business metrics are. You know what the leaders are really looking for within the business. So we got a couple people who were really interested in, I understand this. I know it's more than just engagement. So let's really experiment with different tactics. And in exchange, we offered these individuals mentoring. We offered a sense of competition. We even bribed them with goods. So you can see Özge there in Turkey. She won a jacket for having great performance across her country, and could really market the program for us. This was really great to be able to not only encourage this local adoption of our programs to develop our talent for the future, but it was also really good to document what was working, and we began to track trends. So for instance, everyone would document what they were doing each month. We would get together, and one of the things that we saw time and time again was actually something that we believed to be true, but now we had the data behind it, was that learning was so much more impactful when a business leader provided the why behind it. When the business leader, instead of learning and development, is saying, yeah, you know what? Digital automation is the future for our group, and you really need to understand it. People are going to go and spend the time to do it rather than coming from learning and development. Some other things that I wanted to highlight is on the engagement side. And many of you are probably familiar with using personas. Have you used personas to develop design content? Well, we tried to take it a step further and use personas for our engagement. Especially now that we're in a hybrid environment, people are accessing learning in different places. That might be on their phone, it might be from home, it might be in the office. So what might we be able to do looking through various persona lenses? So one of the things that we started with back in 2019 when we're all in the office was, hey, people are accessing learning from their phones. Let's give them an easy way to get there. So we popped QR codes on a lot of our digital signage within our offices. This is a picture actually from our Cary office. One of the big reasons I moved there in North Carolina, because it's a fabulous, fabulous campus. And got traction for people being able to learn on the go. Now, once we moved over to everybody working from home, the QR codes really didn't work that well. So we moved over, how can we market this better, right? Like learning, it's not going to sell itself. We actually hired somebody on our team to care for the marketing of learning and could develop fantastic opportunities in with our communications team and marketing to really bring to life our learning through not only learning, but other opportunities out there, such as communications. We also found people said, you know what, there's so much content out there, I don't even know where to start, right? And you can go out on Google, you can find stuff, we can find things internally to our companies. So we developed what we called Click Start Your Future. This was a really easy way for people to do a quick self-assessment to figure out, where do I even start? And by answering a couple questions, we're presented with a learning plan that they could follow along at their own time. And what I really liked about this, I think some questions can be, like, do you want to learn about automation? Do you want to learn about emotional intelligence? But the way that the statements were phrased, it really helped people think through what they were doing, what's the level that they're at, in order to get them to the right type of content. So this is an example of the recommendations that they would be presented with. It had direct links into the content where they could do some self-study, and then eventually, after completing the self-studies, could enroll in more workshop-based content. Taking a look at the personas again, we realized, gosh, there's a real opportunity to use some new innovative technologies. And this is where GP Strategies came in again to the rescue. You'll actually hear from Tom right after me on some of their capabilities at GP. But we looked at digital automation, and it's like, gosh, if there's any topic that we're gonna do something sexy with, automation is it. So we created a VR experience so that people could put a headset on, whether we're at a roadshow or within an onboarding program, to actually meet people within digital automation, no matter where they are around the globe, as well as figure out, how do I build a case for automating a process? MetLife is over 150 years old. There's a couple processes that need automating, and our digital automation team can't do everything. So we really empower our associates to figure out, hey, what can we automate, and give them the process for going about that. Another marketing mechanism that we use is sarcasm. So nobody, or we've probably all been through some training on customer service, customer focus, customers at the center of everything. So we thought, well, let's just turn this on our head and give people 10 ways to lose their customer. This was a pretty popular one. Stay inside the box, never speak up, just having some fun with our learning. Just gonna skip past those. I wanted to spend a little time on our action guide. So I mentioned earlier about our local enablers. So from the center, there's only so much that we can do. And our marketing partners put together an action guide. And this is specifically for our leadership program, so that we can share this with our HR business partners, with champions within each one of our businesses, to really be able to take our learning and run with it. What can they do to really link back, again, to those business goals, to the strategies for their individual business units? So every month we hold a touch point to inform our enablers of what's happening within the programs, and giving them sample language that they can use very easily, that they can put this within their Yammers, on Slack, give them slides to use specifically for their town halls. Just really make it as easy to pick up and run with as we possibly can. This has really been a game changer for us. We hear there's just so much going on within the organization. How can we possibly keep up with what's going on? This is a really, really easy way to get your enablers to be using learning and applying it to what's going on in the business. Another ancillary item that we do is success stories. We find this is specifically for our leadership program, but leaders learning from one another is quite powerful. So really highlighting where leaders have taken advantage of our learning, gone through the programming, and then taken it back to their job. What's different? How have they used the learning and development that's been provided? And that's really given other leaders opportunities to say, yeah, well, that makes sense, and I can do that too. I'll spend a little time on our program performance. We've heard a lot already today about sentiment surveys that can be done through programs, but I wanted to take a different look at it just for a couple minutes. So Leading the Future, in addition to surveying our participants, we also survey the leaders of those participants to see, hey, how are they doing back on the job? We also survey those people's direct reports to see, okay, how's your manager doing? Are you seeing changes in behavior? We also took a look at our annual engagement survey. So I'm sure many of you have something like that. And in our engagement survey, there's a series of my manager questions. So for instance, my manager provides me development opportunities. My manager has coaching conversations with me. And we took a look from 2020 to the end of 2021 at what those scores are, okay? And our hypothesis was that those scores would go up. And no, we did not find a direct causation that our program caused people's scores to rise up and now management is perfect. But we did see that there was a bit of an increase, but that really wasn't enough. So we went back to the drawing board and we said, all right, one of our goals is to have a consistent and positive leadership experience for all of our associates. So let's go back to the people who said that their managers weren't up to snuff. And we isolated those individuals from 2020 that said that no, their manager really wasn't providing these opportunities. And then we took a look at the scores in 2021. So really, really isolating the people that really needed the program, right? And needed to improve. And what we found was that not only did the group go from negative commentary to neutral, they went from 38% went from negative to positive. And any of you who are familiar with NPS scores, that's pretty incredible to be able to do, moving from negative to positive in 1 year. So we did find that with 38% of our managers. And again, it's not a direct causation of our program, but it certainly didn't hurt. On our Workforce of the Future program, so this is again is the one for all of our associates. So in addition to the surveys, we also took a look at, and this was an optional program. So we took a look at, are people staying with the company? So what's our attrition rate? Of course, in this time of the Great Resignation, Great Reshuffle, that's a key metric. Are people staying with the company? Are people being promoted? And then also, again, taking a look at that engagement survey to see how they're rating the company. And it was pretty incredible to see isolating those individuals who did take part in the program versus those that did not take advantage of the program. And really showing that those that did participate stayed longer, were promoted more frequently, and had higher engagement scores. So not only is this really good for us to see, we use this in our marketing materials to show, if you're interested in getting promoted or and staying with the company and being engaged, this isn't such a bad thing to get involved with. There's some opportunities out there. And last but not least, before we get to questions, highlighting not only at the macro level, but at the micro level, what individuals are doing with learning is really important. So we reached out to people who had recently been promoted and were very active in the program and asked, how did this program help you? And it was very insightful to get their responses on, yeah, this learning did play a part in me receiving this promotion, and highlighting that to other individuals that yes, this does happen, and you could be part of this as well. So those are some of the things that we're doing outside of like the actual design of programs, but some of the more ancillary enablers. of developing our talent for the future of work. I'd love to take any questions.
So the Workforce of the Future is a program?
It's a program,
It's a
yes.
program that someone else comes in, do you facilitate?
No, it's, so Workforce of the Future, we did a lot of external research as well as talking internally to leaders on what's important for individuals to have to be successful in the future. So there's 9 core skills that were identified, and it's mostly online self-study, whether it's LinkedIn Learning courses, videos, curated content, and then that's really the base, the foundation. Too much talking, I'm losing my voice. Good thing I'm almost done. Which then gets into the application of workshops. But we start everybody with more of like a self-study and then moving into application of workshops.
Chris, I have a question. So it sounds like this is something you put together prior to the pandemic, I'm assuming.
We started.
How did it
yes.
hold up? And did you have to redesign it halfway, or did you find a lot of principles?
No, really. So great question. So we started the Workforce of the Future development before the pandemic, and really we found that it held up well because people were able to access it no matter where they were. We already had that set up for virtual environments, so we were able to pivot pretty quickly.
Did you come up with other measures or metrics for engagement?
So our baseline metrics were really like the participation, right, in the program, right, of not only who was accessing the program and how often. We first looked at who's our initial audience who is accessing the program, but then we started to look at who's our return users, right? So how many times are people coming back into the program and interacting with it? Were our initial engagement measures, and then moving on to more of the macro level of what are our attrition and promotion rates, and then our engagement survey for all of our associates is kind of our gold standard of are we getting to the metrics we want to see.
Thank you.
We have a question over here. Do you just want to shout it out?
I could, yeah. I don't know why I'm standing up.
Or you could just repeat it for the people on the video. Yeah.
Thanks. So very similar from a career development perspective, the program that you're describing. I guess I'm curious, one thing first is the action or development planning. So people can go in and they can upskill or learn about skills that the organization's saying, hey, this is really important. But was there anything done to say, hey, this is, you kind of need a plan, just don't arbitrarily take things? Or was there any emphasis put on having a development plan to point people more precisely to what you want them to do?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We really didn't do that. We didn't say that there's a prescribed plan or pathway for your development.
Okay.
We do have career development, of course, as like a module. So people can establish their goals at MetLife as well as what their development plan is. And we absolutely encourage individuals to place Workforce of the Future, Leading the Future content within there. I think on the leadership side, it's a little bit different. All of the programming links back to our 3 leader expectations. And last year and this year are really years to build awareness of what these leader expectations are, what we expect every single leader, no matter where you are across MetLife, to execute upon. And then starting next year is when we're going to start holding those folks accountable. So those will be built into our leaders' goals, and they will be expected to keep those front of mind.
Since I still have the mic, I have a follow-up question. I'm kidding. Does anybody else have a question? I do have one, but I don't want to hog the mic. So I'll ask it real quick. So the lead, back to the, is part of what we want leaders to do, or that you kind of pushed out as an expectation, make time for the people to engage in the workforce development program,
Yeah.
back to the capacity and, okay.
Yeah. So, one of our leader expectations is to develop talent.
Got
So
it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely links back. And one of the things we keep hearing time and time again is, I don't have time. I don't have time to do this learning. So it's really been a focus for MetLife to not only make that time, but just to take that away. Like, just be intentional with your learning, work it into your day as much as possible, has been really key.
All right. So round of applause for Kristen.
on
Thank you so
time.
much. Awesome. Well done. All right, great. So while our next presenters, that was a great session. 2 really good after lunch sessions, good concise information. I appreciate it, and thank you guys. And just to explain, we're passing the microphone around for questions because it's easier for the people who are zooming in, if you will, to listen. So thanks for playing along here in the room with us. Great. So next up, I think Kirsten gave a little bit of a preview. So we have Tim Pizer. Tom. I can read. Tom, he's Director of Learning Technology for GP Strategy. So he's getting this presentation set up here, and I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit more about the work he's doing and some of the work maybe he did with Kirsten. So welcome.
Hi, everyone.
I mean, just probably another minute, I'm sure. Or are you
I will
ready
be
to go?
just fine in a moment.
Cool.
But can everybody hear me okay? All right, fantastic. I'm going to try and project loudly, and I do still have to do a couple of setup things. I forgot my controllers.
So whilst we're doing that, can you please take some time to fill in the evaluation forms? Thank you. You can't leave the room till you do that.
So I was realizing on the drive up here, I'm from Maryland. And so I was realizing on the drive up here, I used to speak a lot at conferences. I used to get up in front of audiences all the time. And I realized that today is the first time in 2 years, more than 2 years, that I have been in front of a live audience. And so I was a little bit nervous about it. Don't mind me, I'm just kind of setting up the VR stuff. I was a little bit nervous about getting up here in front of everybody today. And I also realized that I haven't tried on a suit in 2 years. So I hope you all like my new suit. Susie, I very much appreciated learning where I sit on that spectrum. I definitely found out that I'm a persuader. Maybe low on the details, big on the vision. I've got to find those other people in the other areas to complement myself, certainly with my team and with my peers. And you're right, I did marry an analyzer. I'm single. No. Okay. Today, we're talking about, or at least I'm talking about for the next 30 minutes, XR technologies, more specifically VR and AR. And I guess really just a conversation about where we're finding success with XR technologies at GP Strategies. We have gone through a number of different projects, I'd say over the past 5 years, that we've really been immersing ourselves into the XR space. And we've found out more about what we don't know about it, and where we thought it fit and where it really fits. And so I'm not going to read these slides to you. Actually, we probably don't have enough time to go through all of the stuff that I want to cover. So I'm going to go pretty quickly because I want to give you some examples. I want to show you some stuff. But I'm often asked, where do I see, as a technologist at GD Strategies, I'm often asked, where do I see VR technologies and AR technologies? I really think that it is the future of learning. And like most technologies that influence or impact the learning spectrum, the question is that going to replace everything else? Absolutely not. But it is finding its niche. It's finding its area in the learner's journey or as a modality. And there are some areas where VR and AR are showing up as being really powerful tools, but in different areas of the business. My slides are going to be available, so all of the information that I've got in here, you can definitely get access to. I'm just going to kind of cover these from the high level. So I believe that most educators, most people in the L&D space know the difference between AR and VR, but just kind of want to set the groundwork. Like this person in this photo, VR is immersing someone into a fictional space or into a constructed environment. So although it may be realistic, or although it may be based in realism, we're inserting them into that environment. And that means that it's got an area that it's really good at. Similarly, AR, I like to think of Iron Man, Tony Stark, but basically you're overlaying information. You're placing information in that user's or in that learner's field of view. So that information should be timely, should be contextual, very often can be performance support and help. And so that's what we're going to look at there. Okay, this is more of the impact slide. This is really what I'm talking about. So virtual reality, as I was saying, fully immersed, fictional or constructed environment. And so we're finding that it's powerful in three primary areas. The first is soft skills training. Now, when we were first looking at this, at VR as a modality, we were thinking, okay, so we're looking at hard skills training mostly. We're looking at virtual tours, flying through space, that type of thing. Hadn't really considered soft skills, but if a learner can be placed in front of either a fictional individual or another person in a 360 video space, you've got them focused on the conversation that they're having. You've got them focused on conflict or feedback, diversity and inclusion, working with customers. So you've got a great opportunity to place them in an environment where they can't step back. If I've got a video on my screen, I can kind of, there's a veneer between you and the character that you're interacting with. Whereas when you're in a virtual environment, there's no stepping away. You look around, it's like looking around a room. So you really do have to focus. I suppose the closest to encountering that type of activity would be to do one, role plays, which not everybody loves to do. At least I say that I don't really love to do them. Or two, on the job. And that's probably the worst place to deal with conflict for the first time, or de-escalation, or working with a customer. Hard skills training, we're certainly finding this as an opportunity to teach someone something for the first time, and I'll show some examples of that. And then an area that was, again, kind of unexpected for me is this virtual meeting spaces. And in a world of COVID, I think that a lot of these spaces in the virtual world are really coming to market rapidly. And I'm going to take you into one of those virtual collaborative work environments. programs, because now the technology has gotten to the point where there are server-based locations where you can get a team together and have those team members working collaboratively in space. Augmented reality, very different use case. So you're able to see the world around you. I would say in the typical scenario, you pick up your phone, you scan a code. I'll show you an example of this that we're using for Visa. And information is overlaid on your camera field of view, enhancing that material, giving you information. Say if there's a QR code. Actually, Kirsten, you had a great example. You're placing codes all around your campus. Isn't it great, or wouldn't it be great that if you scan that information, you can pull up if you scan that code, you can pull up information that's relevant to you, or you can even look through your phone and see directions, or get a video welcome. For hard skills training, particularly in the automotive industry or in our trades industries, we're finding that as a real opportunity for providing just-in-time information about something that I don't do on a regular basis. And then, of course, actually, I kind of did performance support, yes, just-in-time information. Let's say, for example, that I am in a work environment and I encounter a problem and I basically need to phone a friend. The way that this works is I can get just-in-time information from an expert if I'm wearing, say, goggles that have a forward-looking camera, like a HoloLens, if any of you have seen this. That person can see what I'm seeing in my field of view, and they can overlay and provide me with additional information in my field of view, okay? So if you're dealing with particularly complex topics, that becomes a great opportunity for hands-free operation. Okay, so rather than go through what we've done here, I'd like to go through some examples of what we've done in the actual environment. So first, I'm going to show a couple of videos, and then I'm going to get into the headset. Okay, so first with your more hard skills training. Now I realize that, this is the trades industry. I'm going to get into some bank examples as well, especially when we're talking about leadership examples. But in this case, we are teaching safety applications, recognizing dangerous situations, placing ourselves inside of an environment. In this case, we've also considered that we've got learners who are perhaps in a VR headset, but also may need to access that content by desktop. And so this allows for that type of operation. We've got a number of different types of interactions. And in this case, we're allowing the learner to make decisions at certain decision points. And this creates a branching activity. So their outcomes aren't guaranteed. We can set this up with a linear outcome, but also we can set this up for branching. So based off of their answers, they may get something good, better, or best. This is a relatively easy to implement type of scenario. Basically what it comes down to is good storyboarding and good branching interactions. The other type of hard skills training perhaps something that maybe we think of a little bit more when we are thinking about hard skills training. This is an example of lift operations that we developed for a power authority. They have a number of learners who are going out in the field. They need to learn how to properly operate, safely operate, and operate under emergency conditions, a lift and all of its components. So in this case, we're doing three parts to this. First, proper procedure and proper knowledge. Next, proper operation. And then finally, we get into a free play with this. Now, these examples of, kind of a 3D environment allowed us to then start thinking about how might we incorporate this into other learning organizations. So if we're looking at leadership development, how might we get more than one person into an environment, into a three-dimensional environment such as this, and build something that is relevant to the banking industry or to any industry in general? Wouldn't it be great if we could construct an environment where learners from across the globe could work together? And that's exactly what we conceptualized with the next example. So our customer at HSBC came to us and said, we have an annual leadership program. And in that leadership program, we go through instructor-led courses. We have a number of e-learning courses, and we're teaching about tenets and principles of leadership development, what it takes to be a good leader, what it takes to be a good communicator. One of the things that we want to do is, since this is going to be virtual this year, is we want to create a breakout room activity that's going to get people thinking about employing those skills, but it's going to be fun and is going to generate conversation. So we thought, wouldn't it be great if we created anybody ever been to an escape room? Okay, so we've got a lot of escape room aficionados here. Wouldn't it be great if we can construct a virtual reality escape room where the attendees get inside of this environment and then they're presented with a situation where they've got to work out the solutions as a team? And that's what we did. So we constructed this story. We set expectations. I'm not going to go through line item by line item. We have our fearless captain, who you might recognize. Can't really hear this, but the bumbling captain here is getting the time machine set up, and things are already starting to go off the rails, kind of setting the scenario. What we contrive to tell them is that you're going to travel 20 years into the future, and you're going to learn about the future of leadership. And when you get there, we're going to be, we want you to pay particular attention to how are they operating in an agile fashion? How are they dealing with cognitive load management, with lots of things coming at them? Thinking with a digital mindset, prioritizing and collaborating virtually. The next thing we do is we get them inside of their virtual environment, and all of a sudden things go off the rails. Now, one of the things that you're not supposed to be doing, and it's certainly as a leader, is operating inside of silos. In this activity, which I'll show you in a moment, we literally place them inside of silos. So I'll jump in there, and I'm going to show you the inside view of my headset, and hopefully be able to take you through this activity. So just one moment. Okay, so headset on. And I'm going to the enterprise tool, which is right here. So our partner for this, the company called Immerse. And Immerse session has expired. 777. There we go. All right, this is the way that we track individuals in this environment, is we give each person their own individual login. So my login is 777874. All right. Okay. So somebody tell me when you can see I'm seeing. Just one moment. This is the thing that I love about giving demos. Go. Okay. There we go. Okay, you should be able to see my environment now. So I'm going to launch the escape room. All right. Let's give it one moment. So this is a escape room environment that we constructed. So this is what your time machine looks like. Now, to me, this looks three-dimensional. This control panel is sitting in virtual space. 7, 7, 7, 8, 7, 4. Okay, so we navigate using our hand controllers. Presumably, before we get anybody in here, we will have instructed them on setup for their headset, how to navigate inside of the space. As a captain, I will get each person to go to one corner of the room. We call these corners our time pads. So each person will get inside of the center of one of these areas, and this is what's going to drop them inside of their silos. Once I've got them in here, what I know is that this room here, which is directly back from this launcher, is going to go to a prehistoric time period, medieval time period, Victorian time period, and a future time period. I'll then launch the activity. Everybody ready to meet our future? And already things start to go off the rails. So we've got an error. We've got our walls have come down. Now here's what's got to happen. I'm going to just very quickly kind of take you through this. As the captain and as the facilitator, I can cheat. What I can do is I can jump over to here and I can poke my head through and I can see, oh, well, this person is in prehistoric time period. And we've got our dinosaur here, which is definitely scaring our participant. All right. And we also have a clock that's counting down. Now, what that means is that by the time that reaches 25 minutes, the activity is over. So the team's got to work together to get the person who is in the oldest time period progressively to the person who's in the next time period. The way that this is accomplished, each of the participants has clues in their room. And you may not have noticed, but on the wall of the prehistoric room, there was something very similar in these paintings. There were also 4 circles on the wall. They're slightly different in each room. It takes a power of observation for people to take a look at the world around them and then decide what is important, what is unimportant. Most importantly, though, they've got to communicate. They can hear each other. They just can't see each other because they're kind of separated by these doorways. So the next thing that they've got to do is identify, well, in my room, I see that in the 3 circles, I see what looks like an etching of water. And the person who is, got to navigate to the next time period. The person who's in the Victorian time period says, oh yeah, I see something similar to that, but my painting is in the 2nd circle and it's a mountain. And then the person who is in the future time period, jump through here. They say, well, I see some neon signs. I see 4 circles, and the 1st circle is the one that is filled in. It looks like it's got a fire signal. If our person in our prehistoric period is paying attention, and if everybody's not talking over each other, and if they're working kind of cooperatively together, they'll realize we've got some tablets here. And well, I heard the person in the Victorian time period say that their mountain was in this location. And of course, we were just in the, oh, stop that. Hang on a second. Can't pick it up. Yep. Okay. So we've got the wind, which we see in our time period here. So I can place that in its spot. And then we've got water. Okay. So this is how one of the 4 puzzles are completed. Now I couldn't complete that one because my guardian is set up a little bit wrong, so I can't actually reach down and grab that one. But as the captain, I've got another cheat. I can reach my hand in here and I can release the prehistoric room. I hear a sound that signifies triumph, and then this door has opened. So now this person in the prehistoric room can move over to the medieval room. They've got another insidious puzzle that involves a poem, a clue, some keys, and some chess. But we've got a series of activities that requires all of the learners to work together cooperatively. Ultimately, once they have completed that activity, then we go through and we review and reflect on the success. We bring in our expert, who in this case is Alon Hunkins, and he'll talk about, he'll bring this back home to the learning objectives and to the focus of the leadership activity. So the activity it's not the learning itself, it's the practice of the learning. And what we're finding is that in the hard skills development, in the soft skills development, that's where it's really powerful. So I said at the beginning, I thought that virtual reality, augmented reality are the future of learning. I believe they're the future of learning, but I really believe that they're the future of learning something for the first time and assessing and reassessing and practicing those skills. The next area I talked about was workshops. So I'll take a little tour over to workshops. Just want to make sure I'm doing okay on time. How am I doing on time?
7 minutes.
So how many?
About 7 or 8 minutes.
7 or 8 minutes. Okay. I want to show 2 more examples. Okay. Oh, you can't see what I can see, can you? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to quit out of this environment. And I'm going to get into a virtual meeting place. So the virtual meeting place that we have is a tool called Arthur. And we have constructed an environment in Arthur. It's got a number of different types of activities. Arthur's a little bit different, or I should say it's a lot different. The escape room activity that I showed you, that can have 4 to 8 participants in that environment. Whereas the Arthur environment can have up to 50 participants inside of this environment. I'm going to go ahead and enter this room. And we've got a number of tools at our disposal. You're going to see that this room is going to build in real time. So taxing this headset quite a bit. We've got a number of different activities in here. Now in this type of environment, you're showing up as avatars. So we can see an avatar that looks a little spooky like me and one of my counterparts here. Inside of this environment, we can set up meeting spaces. We can have activities. Would you rather conduct conversations between people? So would you rather, let me go to slide 1. Slide 1. Would you rather be able to read minds or be able to see the future? All right, so we can conduct some conversations here. We can create a browser inside of this environment. and I am able to navigate this browser, as is everyone who's in here. Anything that you can do inside of a browser that is create an assessment, that can be added into this virtual meeting space. Then we've got other types of tools. So we can leverage things like, let me pull this up here for myself. Okay. So we can have sticky notes, and we can type and place notes in space. We can bring up a pin board. So if I come out here, we see that a pin board has been constructed about 3 miles above the earth. And we're able to pin these items onto a board. We can create notes, locate notes. We can add text labels, all right? So then we can begin to group our notes inside of space. The great thing about this environment is it doesn't matter where anybody is. In this environment, they are together. I'd love to spend a lot more time extolling the virtues of this environment. We have created some workshop meeting spaces for a couple of our car companies where we have introduced new models, new EV models for Mercedes and GM. And we're finding that these generate not only a lot of excitement, but a lot of, I guess, renewed interest in these types of activities. And you can kind of see just how big some of these elements are inside of the space. So I was just down there. Now I'm outside of the digital world. All right, so enough inside of this environment. I know that I've only got a few minutes, and I'd love to show you technologies all day. When we talk about soft skills in the virtual space, I wanted to point out one activity in particular, something that we did with MetLife, Kirsten's organization. And this was soft skill conversations. So inside a virtual space, we built some of these branching soft skills conversations. This is for help center associates who don't often interact face-to-face with customers, but still have to resolve problems and have to do that in a timely manner. Very often, what they can do is kind of lose touch with the fact that they are working with, a person on the other side. So this activity was designed to create that connection. The way that we did it is we placed them inside of the caller's home. So if something is going on in their space, perhaps that caller is calling on a bad day. Maybe they're having a tough time with billing or understanding their policy. Maybe there's an opportunity to help them by introducing new product options. Or maybe they've got a bad life event happening and they need some assistance with navigating their policy, but at the same time, really, you understanding that they are going through a difficult situation. So in this case, not only do I have to know proper procedure, which I'm accomplishing on screen in the environment, but I'm also dealing with the customer face-to-face, which is not something that I do on a regular basis. Wanted to cover off just a little bit on some of the augmented reality as well. So where we are using augmented reality typically is, I guess your most robust environment. You can see our partner is not WorkLink. WorkLink is the product. Our partner is Scope AR. But in this type of environment, just-in-time performance, just-in-time support. These are step-by-step instructions. This is something that I can follow, either learn this procedure for the first time, which we can also do in virtual reality space, or I'm just kind of reinforcing, how did I do those steps? What was the order of operations? In this case, the order of operations for completing this flange activity or completing this assembly activity. You can see that this was done on an iPad. So we're using the forward-looking camera on the iPad in order to go through these instructions. But this exact same activity can be done with headset so that now I've got hands-free. And then I want to show one activity that's a little bit fun, and I know that we're really running down on time here, so last activity. This is something that Aaron from Visa is very instrumental in supporting. So Visa, as an organization, came to us and said, hey, we want an onboarding activity that talks about Visa, who Visa is, what we do, what our value is. We started thinking about this, from the landscape of, how do you describe Visa? How do we create good, consistent messaging? Very often when somebody asks about Visa, they come back with, well, I think Visa is a bank, or I think Visa is a credit card. And that would create shock at the upper levels of Visa. Really, Visa is a network of networks. It's a technology, information, and application company. But not a lot of people know that. Not a lot of people know how transactions work. So we created a graphic novel, something that's a little bit fun. But then to enhance this, because there is a lot of information and a lot of data behind this story, where we're teaching about push operations and pull operations, how might we infuse more information into this environment? So using your standard phone, I can pull up my camera, I can scan a QR code. This is going to launch a viewer. Now this viewer is going to ask me, hey, am I allowed to use your camera? And can I scan objects in this environment? So I just tell it to allow. And now every time I scan a code in here, now I'm able to see just-in-time information. So this video, well, this is just a little introductory video.
Hello, fellow Voyagers.
All right, so that's just a simple introduction. If I get further in the story, if there's deeper information about Visa as an organization, a push operation, a pull operation, working back and forth between banks and sellers and customers, this is going to provide me with additional information. This is a very simple application.
Hello, fellow Voyagers. I'm number 8, your guidance source.
So any information that you can place on the web, any information that you can push on the web, or assessment, you can do as long as you're able to scan, either recognize contextually where the learner is, scan a tag, and find out where the learner is, and then present them with anything that can be web delivered. I know that I'm running short on time here, so I'll go ahead and pause things here. Further in my presentation, if you're interested, I've got information on data and studies. PricewaterhouseCoopers has done a fantastic study on the efficacy of virtual reality. 2 things I want to point out here. What they have found is that learners are 4 times more focused inside of these environments. The reason is because you can't really do anything else than complete the activity or focus on what is being presented to you. Consequently, on the far left here, learners are 4 times faster to learn than in classroom-based activity, because you have to focus on the task at hand and you have to resolve that scenario in order to get to a successful end. There is additional study information here that I would invite you to have a look at. I think there's some fantastic information. And a little bit further down, we've got the how we do it. So when you're conducting that first conversation, when you're trying to learn about a project, the fit and the value of VR versus AR, I've got some guidance here on the questions you need to ask and some of the considerations you need to make as you're going through your project and determining, how am I going to get headsets to people? How am I going to deploy new content? How am I going to update content? So please have a look at this. All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Awesome.
And Tom, I'm assuming you're available for questions. Grab you. We're having a break now for the next half hour, so
Sure thing.
grab you for questions. Wonderful. So we're going to break until 4:00, and just a quick reminder: when we're done, we'll come back at 4, have a couple more sessions, and then we'll have a cocktail reception next door. So as you're planning the next couple hours with us, make sure you schedule that in. All right. Again, thank you, Tom, and we'll
Thank
see everybody back at 4:00. Thanks.
Thank you. It's been a while.
Should be higher. That should be good. Let's see here. Let's get One second now, because of the way that made am I in your way?
No, I'm looking for where I stuck my bag.
Right here.
Oh, there it is. Well, technically, yes, you were. No worries at all. That didn't turn out.
Is this your? Is that your mouse?
No, this is mine. No, that's not mine. No, that is mine.
Can we just set this one down? Yep, we'll double check it here one more time. I think you do.
Right, I can see myself, I can see. Testing 1, 2. Testing. Oh, you. Testing 1, 2. JT's on it?
No, he's not on yet. He had a 3:30 meeting.
Is there a problem with my communication or
What's that?
is there a problem or?
No, I don't think so. I'm good.
Okay. I was just worried that the audio check. I didn't hear anybody on your end.
No, they're not on yet.
Okay.
My primary person isn't, he's gonna be coming in right after a meeting. But, and I'm not logged in quite yet.
I gotta go potty. so I'll
Yeah,
be
you
back.
go, yep.
One. 10 seconds.
Testing microphone, test 1, 2, 3. 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 Gary, if you can hear me right now, can you just turn your camera on and give me a camera check? Just us? It is so true. Just like everybody else. Add some other drinks out there?
And 7 of them, 2 other drinks. Coffee, if you want to be. Because he's just there to anyone.
I am as well. So you'll see me kind of move up to the edge here, and I'll move around like this so that I can stay on camera, but also because I may walk to the back of the room yeah. These podiums are too high for me. I feel like a little kid peeking over them. You and I, we get each other. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I cannot. So I'm sorry they may not get to see my face. But like, I'm gonna go. So I'm trying to see like this out.
And this will all be gone. This is just because I'm bringing in a presenter with me who's on Zoom.
Virtually?
Yeah, he's coming in virtually.
No, so,
But
this is, I guess, I'm wondering if this is a camera from here. Usually you're from the mirror.
yeah, now I do.
Which is, I guess, why they.
But I'm guessing like right here, you probably just see like a little bit of my head because.
No, I see like from here.
Oh, okay,
later.
good. Okay, good.
So people can see you camera wise, but the problem is people, I will be hitting my eye people.
This side of the room is good. Straight back and right in here is
Yeah.
where.
And then my other issue is standing like I was so maybe if I can just hold the mic, I'll feel better.
Likewise, I typically do well because I project. I almost get too loud sometimes.
Yeah, so maybe I was like, if I just.
But to that end, I'm with you. I don't like being on that.
Yeah, I don't like the anchor stuff. So I'm just like.
Because like when I have to get everything laid out, there would be space along that wall and more space along that wall because I'll move the entire room.
Right, or at least let me like Vanna wipe the situation
Yes.
or something. I really was not paying attention. I didn't know we were like live streaming this as well.
I didn't realize that was going to be on YouTube as well.
Is it gonna stay up there?
No, well, it's a private YouTube stream,
Mhm.
so it's not a public YouTube stream. So,
You must have missed that detail.
so that's why I have a little different setup going on here from a hybrid perspective than what I would typically have to make sure that audio and everything is running.
Yes.
It should.
Do you want to take a picture?
Definitely.
Okay, because so I work in employee experience transformation, and what this is really making me think about is as we talk about hybrid, like the experience of hybrid and trying to like accommodate people who are not. So like we just literally had an email this week and someone was like, well, someone's having a meeting and they're having it in person and they're not accommodating people who are not coming to the meeting. And like, what do we?
So that's exactly what we're about to talk about.
Yeah. And so I was like, I actually want to see if I can capture like this entire situation because this is accommodating hybridness, right?
Yes, and there are actually, you'll see even in the presentation, there are pictures of what we had for a setup in order to make this happen. So
because it's like it's crazy. I'm just I can capture like podium slides.
now, I will tell you, when the pictures you're going to see, you're not going to see a podium, you're not going to see the built up because the facilitator wanted to be down, and it was a very interactive. It's what we refer to as more of a small interactive hybrid versus a larger general session style or a big tent style hybrid setting.
But I think thank you. Like my job is employee experience, right? And so I think a lot about like the how of what we ask people to do, right? Because where they get stuck is the how. So like if I tell a senior leader that you have to have a meeting and it has to be hybrid, that means you have to accommodate people in the room and you have to accommodate people who are virtual. But I laughingly like want them to understand like the technology and the making it all happen, and even the consideration of like you as the facilitator, where we stand, where we might be used to being able to move around the room.
Right.
That changes, and so even when you're thinking about your technology implication, it used to be different. So like I used to record organizations.
I am just checking to make sure when my phone buzzed that wasn't my my other presenter.
I used to record an organization where we routinely projected from location to location.
Right.
And because of that, like the cameras were ceiling mounted. And so we could, as facilitators, move around and they could still see the screen, they could still see us. And so it's interesting.
But to that end, what I would typically do from a setup here is probably we would have 2 cameras in there. One probably in the back corner or back center.
Right.
That was focused on facility.
Yes.
One in the top right or top left, that was wide angle focused on the audience. And we may even take the back. Yes. No, I didn't. And
I have so many thoughts. Okay.
back corner,
Right.
what I would do is what I would do on the back corner is I would actually take stuff out. Yeah. Yep, he's here. Yep.
So because I think I'm going to write a whole piece on whose experience matters, because different people are having different experiences. So your presenter, they're having an experience. You're having experience. They're having experience. We are having experience.
And those participants online.
Right.
are having
And how do you marry all of that? And that's like, this is why I miss
So
conferencing.
I am at the booth at the very end over here. Please stop by. Because we can definitely talk through, and I can talk through a little bit more about how all this, and like I said, through that setup. Like one of the other things I would potentially do, depending on what budget was and where, is we've got some devices that you can mount the camera on, and then give your presenters a little watch band or thing to put in their pocket, and it will follow them through.
Really?
In and out, depending on.
Oh my gosh, I will
So,
stop by.
yes.
'Cause
So-
I mean, we
so
have
this
a
thing's along.
really good technology group. I work for Accenture. But I don't, from what I'm hearing, whatever we're using in different places is closed. and that's why I love conferencing, because I'm just like, sometimes, even with us being this smart, and like little teams might be like, I want to have it, but like technology solutions hasn't quite pulled in all the pieces. But I want like a leader who's going to have a meeting to feel comfortable that they have the right. And to be able to say, like, this is the experience you're creating. These are the things you need to be thinking about. And that's, I'm more of a like concept that helps them be like, oh, yeah, this is what I need to do.
Yep. Hey, Jeff, it's Lee. Yeah, it looks like you're muted right now.
All right. How's that?
Good, I just turned your volume up a little bit.
Okay.
I gotta turn you up just a tad bit more.
Okay. Testing, testing.
That sounds good. I got you on video, and do you have the audience pinned?
I do. I haven't been.
Perfect.
So is this a group of learning professionals, or what are they, just general?
This is learning professionals.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Me too.
I'll move back and forth. So.
I got part of the main screen on the stream, and I got a laptop. I don't think this lid open far enough. Okay. Since you're gonna move around, I got a wide angle.
I can stay within the box though.
Okay.
Yes. Exactly. So it's kind of different branch.
Ready? I am. If I take this off there. I think it's pockets. Right. Obstacle free. Yes. Be about 2 minutes, Jeff, okay?
Hey, I'm doing good. I'm actually going to an L10 event tonight up in Short Hills.
So you are headed up?
Yeah, I'm going up to the Short Hills L10 reception tonight.
I was just gonna say, a big trend for centralized or decentralized. I mean, and especially in learning and development. You saw a bunch of decentralized learning, especially in insurance, a lot of different offices. Now it's like, different lessons to line, how many different, you know, people want to follow the same way.
Okay. Testing, testing. Well, I think it turns on and off just background noise or something.
Okay, Jeff, we're gonna get started.
All right, good. We'll go ahead and get started. If you could grab a seat and wrap up your conversation, that'd be great. All right, well, welcome back from our break. We are now officially in the home stretch. So next up, and probably the winner of the best dramatic title of a presentation, The Aftermath of the Pandemic. I like that. So introduce two presenters. We have Lee Diener, who is here present. He's the president of Leading Edge Training Solutions, and they're a virtual event production and consulting company. And then on a video conference, we have Jeff Taylor, who's a learning development director with Harmony Biosciences. Please join me in welcoming them.
Thank you. And as we go through, there's a number of things that we're going to talk about as we talk through today. Now, if I start to get back and you have problems hearing me, which typically is one thing that my wife tells me that she never has a problem with, we just let me know, give me a signal, because I do move. I'm a mover, and so podiums, on top of the fact that I am a little vertically challenged, and so seeing over the podium is an issue as well. So as we talk through today, one of the big things we're going to talk about, and I heard it from the beginning this morning, is this whole idea of the hybrid environment. We're going to talk about a definition of what hybrid environments are, and then we're going to go through a case study with Jeff that we did for an event that he had that was a training event. There were actually two events in particular, and we'll go through and we'll talk through what some of these hybrid events are. Now, one of the first things I do want to say, though, is one thing that came up this morning that we actually really haven't heard much before, and I'm definitely taking back, is this idea of hybrid equity. It's terminology that we haven't heard before, but at the same time, it's always been the focus of how we design hybrid events, because you want those people who are virtual to be able to be involved just like those people who are live, and vice versa. And so we're going to talk about that as well as we go through the session. So first, I'll introduce myself. As was mentioned, my name is Lee Diener. I'm the president and owner of Leading Edge Training Solutions. We're a virtual event consulting and production company. But the place that I ended up in this position from was I was actually working with Jeff almost 11 years ago when the swine flu hit. And Jeff was my director of training, and the company that we worked for told us that there was no non-essential business travel because of the swine flu. And guess what they said? Training wasn't essential. We had 40 sales representatives who were coming in. This was a Tuesday, who were coming in that Sunday, that were no longer coming in. Now, I'll ask you to guess what our sales VPs for those 40 sales representatives said when they were told training's not essential, so your reps can't go sell until they're trained, and we don't know when that's going to be. They went ballistic. They were not happy. And so we were tasked with figure out how to train 40 sales reps in 3 weeks without bringing them into the home office. We'd never done anything before like that. And so that's where all of this started and how we all started. And Jeff, I'll let you introduce yourself and kind of talk to how that ended up.
Yeah, so thanks, Lee. Hey, everybody, I'm Jeff Taylor. I'm with Harmony Biosciences. We're a biotech pharmaceutical company based in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania, so just north of Philadelphia. I'm actually based in New Jersey. I'm working from home today. I tend to go into the office about 3 days a week. This evening, I'm heading up to northern New Jersey, so I couldn't be down in Philly today. But thank you for the opportunity to present to you and to work with Lee here. And like Lee, I've been in pharma about 33, 34 years. I've been in the last 18, 19 years, I've been in learning and development. I'm one of these guys that came into learning and development thinking it would be a 2 or 3 year rotation for me, and I would rotate back out as a sales leader. And I fell in love with learning and development, and I decided to put a stake in the ground and build my career around that. And I've been doing it again for about 19 years. So Lee's taking you back a few years here to 2009 when, our first pandemic that we faced, Lee and I we were at Sanofi Aventis, a very large drug company, and they determined, as Lee said, that travel for training was unessential, but the training was essential. And you need to train people, coming in Monday. They gave us 3 or 4 days notice to get ready for this for this class. And of course, we launched a full scale virtual training program in about 4 days. So nothing like necessity being the mother of invention there. So yes, we kicked off a full virtual training program just in 4 days. We pulled out the corporate credit card, went across the street to Best Buy. We bought cameras, we bought tripods, we bought lights, and we just kind of went at it. And it was really kind of fun because no one expected us to be successful. And so it was really hard to fail, right? And we kind of had that working for us. And what we're going to talk about today sort of evolved out of that virtual environment. So as the restrictions on travel were loosened for several weeks after that pandemic started and sort of subsided, we started combining our virtual training with our live events. And so our hybrid training that Lee's going to talk about evolved from our virtual training. And so Lee and I have been doing this for a long time, and we're very excited to talk about it. So Lee, I'll hand it back over to you.
So as that came out, as Jeff mentioned, as we came into this, it was, for me as a trainer at that point, it was, I can't wait till I'm done with this. I don't ever want to do it again. But then all of a sudden I figured out that I had to figure out how to do this, and I had to think about things in a different way. So as we started to continue to do it, back in 2009, here's some pictures of our very first hybrid events. They were pretty interesting, I will say that. We were using Adobe Connect at that point in time because it was the best platform that was out there then. What was really kind of interesting in these sessions, though, is you could tell the difference between people's internet. At that point in time, we were really starting to have cable versus DSL starting to come through. And one of our trainers would tell a joke, and the cable people within about 3 to 5 seconds would laugh. And about 30 to 45 seconds later, the DSL people would get it. And so fortunately, that's not something that we see anymore today. That's one of those pieces that we don't have to account for in quite the same way. But as we started to look at hybrid events here, as we have moved into the post-pandemic time and through the pandemic itself, now we've started to really kind of stratify things a little bit more. So there's really 2 major types of hybrid events that we do typically. We categorize them into 2 areas. One is the big tent hybrid style event. In some ways, it's what we're doing today with this going out on YouTube. You've got a one-way feed. Your participants are watching, but they're not interacting, other than they may have questions coming in via a chat tool, something like a Poll Everywhere, maybe a text from a Poll Everywhere, something along those lines. There's not a whole lot of high-level interaction. And that's not what we're going to focus on today, because that one's a little bit easier from a technical perspective to pull through. Where we're going to focus is more of the interactive hybrid session. It's a smaller group session. It's highly interactive. You've got participants that are both live and virtual. You may have facilitators who are both live and virtual. In these cases, our facilitators were live, but they wanted to be able to be more interactive. And so that's where we were really starting from as we started to come through these events. So in order to start to do the planning process, Jeff uses the ADDIE model. And so he's going to talk a little bit about the training side from an ADDIE perspective, and then I'm going to take over and talk more about the technical side from an ADDIE perspective. Jeff, you want to talk a little bit about the considerations with ADDIE?
Yeah, so thanks, Lee. So I can see the audience. So I'm just curious. I've been in pharma my whole career, and I've been in pharma training my whole career. ADDIE is a big model for us in pharma. It's a good what model. It's not a great how model, but a great what model. And I'm just curious, do you folks in the financial industry, do you guys use ADDIE as one of your design models? I see you raise your hands. Excellent. Okay. It's good to know we're from the same planet. I appreciate that. Very good. So you guys obviously know what ADDIE means. It's a great planning model. It's a great model to sort of target some feedback against around training. And of course, the A is for analyze or assess. The the 2Ds are design to develop. And of course, you have implementation and evaluation. And I just wanted to talk about maybe the first 4, components of ADDIE in terms of thinking about your hybrid sessions. And I'm going to go over to Lee. I'm going to go to the analyze assess slide. So one of the things we found out very quickly back in 2009 about our training, and most of our experience then was around onboarding new hire, sales training and product training. We found out very quickly that our training design was not very good. It relied heavily on the quality of the facilitator and an engaging facilitator, and didn't rely a whole lot on really design. And of course, the new hire training is sort of built in, the need is built in, so it's very purposeful. But when it comes to sort of the events we're doing now, where we're not doing new hire training, we're doing more of a continuous learning perspective. The big word for me is purposeful. Why are we doing this training? Why are we asking people to come in? Why are we asking them to attend virtually? Because it's still time, right? Time is time. And in the case study that Lee's speaking of that we did last year, there's nothing like having an executive sponsor come to you and say, hey, I see a gap in my team around strategic planning. We need a solution for that. All right. So there's my purpose. There's my business need. We're going into a brand planning environment. It was the 3rd quarter of the year. And so my training would be readily applied on the job. All the major components of adult learning were built into that. Of course, my target audience was sort of built in for me as well, but making sure you have the right people in the room for your training as part of your gap analysis. And that last point there around expectations and corporate norms. And that's around the virtual environment and what's expected of people. And one thing that's come out of the pandemic that wasn't evident before, it wasn't really possible, I would say possible, but wasn't standard before, was the use of video. Before the pandemic, we couldn't get people to turn on their videos to save our lives. But once the pandemic hit and people were meeting more in the virtual environment, we saw a lot more people being willing to come on camera. And we established right away at Harmony Biosciences that if you're going to be in a training or a meeting, your camera would be on if at all possible. And we like to have that connectivity of the video. It certainly raises engagement. But the one thing we made very, very clear to people is that we understand we're in your homes and that people and pets are okay. Family and pets are okay if they stumble into the room. So you have to set the right expectations and the right norms around your hybrid events, because we want people comfortable turning on their cameras, but not embarrassed about their family or their pets. All right. And if you want to do something fun at your next event, people that are online and on their camera, stop for a second and ask how many of them have a pet, a dog, a cat, a rabbit, whatever, under their desk. And you'll be amazed at what comes up on camera and what people share with you. All right. So that's an important component of thinking about your hybrid training or your virtual training, is that those corporate norms and expectations and what people can be comfortable doing. So I'll stop there if there's any questions or any comments. All right, a bunch of bashful trainers. I don't believe that. Right, Lee, I'm ready for the next slide there.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about design and development. And on the left-hand side of the slide there, I've included a couple of the learning models or the design models that I like to use. I like to keep things very simple in terms of my instructional and curriculum design models. And you guys will notice on the left, you'll see the Bloom's taxonomy is on the left side of that pyramid. And it sort of lines up very nicely with how we learn, the how we learn pyramid. Lecture, reading, audio, visual, demonstration. As we get into that lower part of that pyramid, we get into more experiential learning and active learning. And so one thing we found out about our training back in the day is that it was so heavily based on facilitator presentations, and that wasn't based a lot on active learning. And that was the major transformation that we made with our hybrid learning and our virtual learning, was making it more experiential. And so how do you build activities into that environment? Well, the one thing you have to remember about activities, they have to be workable for both audiences, right? So you have a live audience, you have a virtual audience, and make sure those activities are practical for both groups. Make sure that they're structured around experience, And if you use the bottom part of that pyramid, a small group discussion, problem solving, practicing, teaching others, you can't go wrong with building experiential learning into your event. We also like to use workbooks with our events, so people have a place to anchor their thoughts, their reflections. The workbooks are mostly places to take notes or fill in the blank or engage with the slides. I may show a slide on the screen and half the information on that slide in their notebook is missing. They have to fill that information in their notebook so I can engage my virtual audience as much as I can engage my audience that's in the classroom there. And slides with minimal content, hopefully I'm modeling that here as well. And again, supportive activities in your workbook. And then we want to have a common visual experience. And what do I mean by that? I mean not having the camera in the classroom showing the projector and the slide up on the wall or up on the screen. You guys have seen that before, where you're attending a virtual event and you're seeing the slide that's on the camera that someone's projecting the actual video from the room. And that's a horrible visual experience for your virtual learners. And they have to be able to see the same slide the same way that your in-class person is seeing. In fact, they can probably see it better because they're in the virtual environment. And again, I'll stop there with any questions or any comments or any questions around developing some of that active learning, items in your training.
Jeff, I'm just going to interject on this one real quick as well. From a virtual perspective, as we started to plan, you'll see up here Poll Everywhere was one that we utilized, but there's a number of other platforms out there now that are very similar to Poll Everywhere that can be used, like Slido and Pigeonhole and a few others. The reason why that platform was important is because how does everyone respond with those? With their phone. So whether you're sitting here in person or you're sitting at home and on virtually, we're getting your responses, or they all have Q&A as well. So we're getting your Q&A if it's coming through, versus if you've got people on a platform and you've got a hybrid style event. Now if you're using the Q&A from the platform itself, either you've got somebody who's monitoring that Q&A, but for your people who are sitting here, they don't have a way of asking a question unless we have one person who's typing in or something along those lines, especially if you have remote presenters. So something like Poll Everywhere is important because it pulls everyone together from a hybrid perspective. And if you do have remote presenters, it allows that remote presenter to monitor the Q&A as well.
Excellent. And so, one of the things I like to stress is this balance between content and activities. And people learn best through that balance, right? A combination of content and activities. And the question is, well, how often do you do an activity? So we try to do an activity every 7 to 10 minutes, break the content up that way. And we don't like to go any longer than 20 minutes between content and then a learning activity, okay? It can be a short activity like answering a poll. It could be a short activity like doing something on the chat, or it can be an extended activity like going into a breakout, doing some problem solving or some analysis and something like that, all right? So no more than 20 minutes of content without a break for an activity. And the only challenge to that is it does take more time for your learning. Okay, so build that into your curriculum. Okay. All right, and then the last slide I have is around implementation. So we leverage a learning content management platform to either set up our self-study or our home study. We try to deliver as much reading or text-based learning up front and not put it on PowerPoint slides. Again, I talked about these learning journals and these participant workbooks. They're critical not only for the live environment, but also for the virtual environment. People need to have a place to anchor their learning, right? They need to have a place to engage with their learning, capture their thoughts, take their own notes. And the more structure you can provide around that, the better. And then, pulling this stuff through, leveraging this information on the job, all the job aids, all the pull through, we manage through our content management portal. And in the case study that Lee's talking about, we did a program on strategic thinking and on strategic planning, and we had 52 weeks of pull through on that, 52 weeks. And we're on our 44th week right now. And every Friday at noon, they get a push from the system about something that was to do with that course, about strategic planning, and it ranges from 15 seconds to 3 minutes. And so we leverage that content management system to implement not just the event, but what happens after the event, because that's where the learning really takes place. All right, questions or comments on the bulk of the ADDIE model there?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I got a question. So I'm curious, what does a participant workbook look like for your virtual program? And I'm picturing the old spiral bind thing you'd hand to people in a classroom, but is this something you expect people to print, or what does the design usually look like?
Yeah, so I heard part of your question about what does a participant workbook look like. So it's usually, it'll mirror the slide presentation if you're using a slide presentation. And again, we like to use minimums, slides with minimum content. If I have specifics of, items of content I want them to know, I'll put that in sort of a notes format. But there's always going to be a way for them to engage with that. Even a single slide, there's going to be a way to engage with that slide. I will take information off the slide in their workbook that's on the slide on the screen, and I will tell them, hey, there's missing information on the slide in your workbook. I want you to fill that in. Hey, I want you to circle this. I want you to circle this in your workbook as I circle it on in the classroom with my pointer. There's a question at the bottom of the page about the slide. I want you to answer it. All right. So it's like it's an activity, right? I want them always engaged with the learning and not just focused on me or the facilitator for their learning.
Jeff, real quick as a follow-up, did you have them print it or did you send it to them?
Oh, I'm sorry. We usually send that to them.
Yep.
Yeah, send that to them. Now, all of our people do have printers at home. All of our sales reps have printers, and most of our folks have printers at home, so we could have them print that if we wanted to. But we try to be nice.
We got another question coming, Jeff.
Okay.
From the self-study assignments, do you try to actually capture kind of any insight back as to how they're progressing or where there may be some gray areas or kind of something to feed that journey forward? Or is it more informational sort of presenting instead?
So Lee, could you repeat that for me?
Yep. So from a self-study perspective, are you capturing the information to pull it back to gain from it? Or is it more informational that they're learning from? Did I summarize that well? Perfect.
Yeah, because right now with data models, you can actually bring back insight, right, on what of those self-study materials actually kind of made an impact versus where some of the easier versus harder things are for the learner.
So I would say it's more informational. It's more, the self-study assignments are more primers to get ready for the workshop. They're designed more to provide a foundation that we can build from. Of course, they're great resources to come back and refer to later. The self-study assignments are always in the content management portal. People can always go back to them and refresh on them. But they're mostly informational.
Thank you.
I may have missed this. I was taking notes. What's a pull through? That last bullet. Did I miss that?
So
What's
pull
that?
through, I'll take this one, Jeff. So pull through on that front is anything that is what you're going to do post-event in order to pull through the learning. So earlier, I forget which presentation it was, but we were talking about the forgetting curve. And the forgetting curve is a very important aspect to learning. I think pull-through is the one area of virtual that is still the least utilized side, because pull-through was always difficult pre-virtual, because you have to bring people together, take them out of territory, time out of territory, everything that goes along with that. So on the pull-through side, it's laying out a plan post-event. In the first 30 days, those key points that you went through in training, that's a use it or lose it time. If they don't use it in those first 30 days, they're probably going to lose it. So we want to have our first 30 days be set up as what are key points that we can't have them lose. Then as we get into a 60-day, and we typically recommend a 30, 60, 90 pull-through plan coming off of any event. As we get into 60 days, that's an assessment time. In that assessment time, especially when we're working with, say, a plan of action, so you're more sales-oriented, if things aren't working,
then it's time for us to start to reset and find out why, so that in 90, we can actually pull things through and start to readjust where people need to go. If things are working at that point, then we want to have our high performers who are really working, doing things. We want them starting to give their way of doing things, why it's working, why they're seeing success, and then pull that through. Sometimes when you get into your 60s and your 90s, it's not just a single session. It may be that you go down to a regional level, a district level, where you get smaller groups who are doing that, and you have a plan for them to actually run those themselves. So
I also have sorry. I also have a follow-up on the pull-through reinforcement. Did I hear correctly that you're in week 44 of a 52-week? Okay. Just wanted to make sure I heard that right. And could you tell me a little bit about the metrics that you're using to track the success of that? Is this like an email campaign that people are clicking on? And are you tracking anything according to that?
Yeah, so correct. It is an email campaign. Would you get click data on that, and how many are open and how often they're opened? And we actually are combining, two elements. We're doing an email campaign, and then from the email, we actually upload that content. So it gets pushed through an email campaign, but then that content is stored forever in our content management system, and they get notifications from that as well if they haven't opened it. So we're trying to drive as much sort of interaction with that as we can. Again, these are 15 seconds to 3 minutes in length. These are not burdensome at all. Okay. And of course, the further we get away from the event, the less people want to engage because they've already done their brand planning, things like that. But we still have a pretty good rate of people clicking on those and watching those and reading or listening to the content.
And I'm
Yeah.
going to ask if we can just hold the next question for a couple of seconds so that we can roll through a couple of other aspects of this as well. So as we looked at all of this, so Jeff came with all of the scope. We look at things from more of a learning perspective, so that's exactly what we want to see up front. But now there's a whole other aspect to this. And so typically when you get to this point, you're now at a point where, okay, now we need to go find the the hotel or the space, and we're going to, wherever it may be, we're going to do it. When you're starting to pull in hybrid, there's a whole other aspect that comes into planning that we then jumped into. Now, we use AV squared because really there are three main elements we need to think about. The first one is audio. Audio is one of the key aspects. I don't know if anybody saw today, but during lunch, we had our audio hooked up and we were testing and making sure that you didn't hear any of that awful reverberation. Has anybody ever heard it? That you don't want to hear and you don't like to hear. So you're starting to think through those aspects. Speaker setup, all of those pieces. With the pandemic, there was another aspect to this. These the microphones that we have up here for the panel discussions. Well, during coming right out of the pandemic, when we had our people together, 2 people didn't want to share one of these mics for obvious reasons. So we had to make sure that we had enough mics for every single person who was in the room live, so they had their own mic. That brings up its own pieces from a audio perspective when it comes to mics being open and staying open, or somebody not turning off their mic. So we've got a team that's controlling a lot of that. From a video perspective, typically what we normally had, because that's one of the major pieces of engagement. Jeff talked to it as well. We put a camera in here back on you guys because for Jeff, I know Jeff as a speaker, that's what he feeds off of. If I had Jeff sitting here and not being able to see you guys, it would be a lot tougher for him because he loves to be able to see the people. He's going to ask a question, have you raise hands, and I know it. We've worked together long enough to know that. So from that perspective, but for those participants who are sitting at home, just think if they're just sitting there looking straight at the presenter the entire time. So we would typically put a camera on that is focused on all of the participants so that we can either keep it up or switch between so that participants at home are seeing a combination of the facilitator and a combination of the participants. And then finally, from a venue perspective, size is one thing for just a live event. You need more space if you're doing it virtually. for a couple of reasons. One, we've already talked about the camera placement and where cameras are going to be. But then in behind that, you also have to have a plan for your technical team. Now, to that end, typically what we had going on from a technical perspective, as you can start to see here, is our technical team is sitting off in the back corner here. So here's all of our tables. Our tech team is sitting off. It was a 2-person team. What they're doing is they're making sure mic levels are turned up and down throughout, because when we start to have participants asking the question and coming in, then we need to make sure that our mics on site aren't interfering with their audio coming in, and vice versa as things are coming through. As you start to do breakouts, and there's one thing on the design side when we start to think about doing breakouts that is a must for me from a virtual perspective. Do not mix your virtual folks and your live folks from a breakout perspective. All those people who are live, they'll be in breakout groups live together. All those people that are virtual, they'll be in breakout groups virtually together. Then when we come back together, if we have a teach back portion, makes it much easier from a teach back perspective. The other thing that you can see here is we actually had 2 separate setups for TVs and screens. So the TV here has our virtual participants on it. This morning, and Susie, I think it was you that mentioned having the participant that had the camera on, but all you could see was a chair. So that's the type of thing. And Jeff talked about expectations. I remember expectations was one of the key points talked about this morning. Those expectations are important. Those participants, if they were here live, everyone would see them. Why is it any different virtually when it comes right down to it? And I understand that there's Zoom fatigue and that's, but if this content is important enough that we're pulling people in from a learning perspective, then we need to set some learning expectations with that as well. And we want to have those people up because for the participants who are on site, it's good for them to know who the people are that are on virtually as well. But it also makes them be there and be in the moment and not doing other things because they know that other people are actually paying attention to them during the session. So then when we got into the implementation phase, that's where we really want to set our expectations, support the virtual attendees. That's also where the technical team comes in. If somebody has a problem, then we want to be able to react to them quickly. Now, I will say 90% of the time, the problems fall into one of 2 categories. Internet-based, which is, okay, is there anybody else in the house streaming Netflix or online gaming right now? So that's, and typically the answer is yes. And then once they stop, everything's good. Or user error in that I can't hear, turn up your speakers, types of, and I know that they sound, or did they dial in on their phone on something like Zoom and they're muted on Zoom and they're muted on their phone. We refer to them as double muters. And they're unmuted, we can see on Zoom, but we can't tell locally on their phone. I will say I am a double muter. And so that is one that sometimes you'll run into from that perspective. So you want to make sure that your virtual attendees are supported. And then the biggest piece to all of this, and this is one of the aspects that we come into, is that risk mitigation perspective. Plan for the unexpected when it comes right down to it. And if you're in a hotel environment, plan for the internet to have a blip or go down at one point because it very well may happen. And so how do we plan for that? We have backups with, we'll use a Cradlepoint or some cellular services, those types of things, but plan for those risk mitigation pieces and make sure that your presenters know what's going to happen. We tell our presenters in any level of event that we're doing, do not stop presenting until we tell you to stop presenting. Because to that end, if they stop presenting because they think that there's a perceived issue, that producer may already have it handled, and it may just be one person that had the issue, and we don't want to change everything for everybody when one person was having an issue. So make sure that they are supported. And then finally, on the evaluation side, we went through from an evaluation, and Jeff touched on a lot of that already, but going through the level 1 through level 4 evaluations,
was an important aspect of being able to pull all this through, especially because this was a interactive level training. It was a strategic planning training. And so they were able to get to the point where they were actually able to do their strategic plans, present them back, and provide critique between those who were live and those who were virtual throughout the session. So the last part that I want to end with is, what are those top 10 principles for any hybrid virtual event when it comes right down to it? Number 10, great audio and video are key. And I would put great audio to trump great video, because if you stop hearing things, that annoys you. If you see that somebody gets a little pixelated and then clears up, that's okay. There's an internet issue there. We've gotten used to that now. Next one is have a great technology partner if you need it. Small events typically don't need it. But to that end, and I've heard a couple people mention their hybrid events had some problems. With that, this is something that there is a lot that needs to happen in order to make it run smoothly from an audio and video perspective, from a design perspective. So have a good technology partner in order to be able to make that happen. Invest in the right tools and equipment. Microphones, cameras, those types of things will actually pay in how everything ends up coming out in the end. Preparation and testing are a must. We always recommend having dry runs and rehearsals whenever we do an event along these lines. We're typically in the day before. All setup happens. Everything is tested. Everything is run from a learning perspective. Family and pets are welcome, as Jeff mentioned. The training is real, only the classroom is virtual. That is an important point. First question I always ask anybody from a training perspective is, how would you train it live? That's what we're going to recreate when it comes right down to it. Virtual component should feel like the in-person classroom. Engage virtual audience early and often. That goes to setting the expectations. Engage them and call out, not individuals, but just say, we have 75% of people who responded. We have 90% of people who responded. We'll get those people. We'll pull them in that way. Breakouts don't mix and match live and virtual. I can't say that one enough. Good in-person design can translate well in the virtual environment. And finally, you've heard it before, great audio and video are key. It's number 1 and number 10, but it is that key element. If there are any other questions, and I know that I missed at least one here, but please grab me right after. And if I can't answer it, it's for Jeff, I'll get you in contact with Jeff to be able to answer it as well.
All right. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Hey, you guys are welcome. Hey, thank you guys for the invitation today. Great being with learning professionals. Guys, take care. We'll see you soon.
All right. Safe travels. Great. All right. I think we're ready to transition to our next presenter. We'll get the PowerPoint switched out. All right. Next up, we have 2 presenters. And so we have Pete Anestrom, as well as Colette McGonigal, both from Learnexus. And I know, speaking with Pete a little bit during one of the breaks, sounds like he sort of conceptualized this new idea and new product, new service, and then the pandemic happened, and it seems like you really seized on an opportunity here. So looking forward to hearing more about what they have to offer. And as we set up, just a quick logistical moment. So make sure you're continuing to progress through your surveys. And then also, we can leave our materials here in the room overnight. We're going to have the room closed up. Obviously, don't leave anything that is personal or might be of value, but you can leave your stuff untouched for the night.
Oh, cool.
All right. I think we're set. Do you need the microphone, Colette? Or here's the microphone. Okay. It's on already. Thank you.
Sorry, where's the HDMI? Is that it? And then the clicker goes.
Do you have any reports for
I do. I have a.
the clicker? Is there?
No worries. You can get an adapter. Okay, thanks. Let me just get the adapter. Any reason? There we go. Oh, we're a little cut off. Okay. Hi, everyone. How are you? Almost the end of the day. Susie's still got the energy. It's I'm impressed. Well, I do apologize. We're trying to get the image right, but you can see half of Colette and myself.
Like a magic show.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. But I'd love to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Pete Ennerstrom. I am the CEO and founder of Lenexus, which is a talent marketplace for training and learning development. But we're not here to talk about that, I promise. Colette is one of my colleagues who was a former director of compliance training at Fidelity. That's right.
Everyone's favorite topics.
That's right. And we are here to talk about the explosion of the gig economy and how that affects the world of learning and development. And I'll be curious to see how that has impacted some of your lives. But we'll dive right into it. And of course, it's very nice to meet you. So this is us. This is the full version of our photos. And here's a little bit of what we're going to talk about. And Colette, feel free to chime in here.
So I think one thing we just wanted to poll quickly is how many in this room use independent contractors in the learning and development space? Okay, so a good number of folks. So we've heard a lot about the...
Sorry, and let me just ask one more question. So how many people use vendors? I'm guessing nearly everyone. And do you know if those vendors then also use independent contractors through those?
Outsource.
Outsource. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we're on to them. Okay, so really with the economy and the gig worker, we'll talk about how values and needs and expectations have shifted, especially over the last 2 years, and look at the time frame there, and how things have transformed and how employees, we heard this morning, have more leverage, but so do independent contractors and independent talent. And then what you can do about it is the owners of these projects and the work that you're bringing in is how can you work with them and they can help you to build that responsive training.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give some examples of what I'm seeing, talking with a lot of hiring managers and employers. And definitely we just see a shift towards flexibility. I would say every single training manager I speak with is at capacity and they need to get more capacity and they need more flexible ways of doing it. It's just what I hear from most conversations that I have. So what we'll start with is we'll just talk a little bit about how the gig economy has really exploded in the last couple of years here.
Yeah, so just really quick. So this chart here talks about the year-over-year growth, just 2021 over 2020. And you can see how the numbers have increased greatly. So it's really interesting to see how that has all come to light. And with COVID, of course, being a factor. But we looked up some statistics and as we said, the gig workers are gaining more leverage. There's about 59 million Americans right now from the Department of Labor that are participating in the gig economy somehow. which is almost about 1/3 of the workforce. And with that, there's about 48% of businesses are using independent contractors in one way or another. So things are changing rapidly and growing in that direction. So lots of interesting information.
Yeah, we also see just the desire for people to moonlight outside of their day jobs. Does anyone in the audience do some consulting on the sides? I'm sure there might be a few people. Yeah, we're definitely seeing that's a growing trend for sure.
Yeah, so a little bit on how they're gaining more leverage. So there's a few ways. We talked about the great resignation or reshuffling, right? And on that, that's really coming to the advantage for folks that maybe wanted to make that shift full-time from being an employee to a gig worker, but also for companies to fill these needs as things are exploding with our workloads and our staffing challenges and some of our talent being recruited out, that they're turning to independent contractors and talent to really start to move and meet not only their short-term needs, which is probably more a thing of the past, but also for longer-term needs as well, and giving them a chance to learn and grow within their assignments to keep them. And it's becoming expensive for full-time employees. We want to keep that talent. We talked a lot about that this morning, but employees have leverage too, and they're asking for more benefits, help with tuition reimbursement, college loan relief. They want to save to buy that first house with these astronomical prices out there, more wellness programs, and all of that's adding up. So when you look at the costs, right, sometimes some of the work, if it suits, would be more suitable for a contractor and perhaps save some of the costs. And as Pete mentioned, there's a lot of folks that are maybe trying out a new skill or trying a new talent, and they're doing that in a safe way by keeping their day job, but taking on a side gig at night and getting some extra income, but learning a new skill where they could maybe up the value of their talent, either internally or externally. And that's really just a point that we saw with some of the research we did with millennials, especially as they're kind of in that place where they've been working a little while, still have a long way to go in their career and want to learn and grow, but they also have a lot of debt and a lot of expenses ahead of them. And this has been a way that they can market their skills and really build their career. So within the L&D departments, can you go one more? Thank you. There's a lot of roles that are suitable in our space, right, for independent contractors. So instructional designers, e-learning developers, LMS in operations, either on the metrics and analytics side that we heard a lot about, but also just on the kind of the shift from a traditional LMS to a collaboration or a cohort type of platform. And a lot of discussion today on virtual instructor-led training. And that's a very easy body of work to lift and shift over to a contractor. And we're seeing that a lot with a lot of our clients.
Yeah, they're definitely the short-term in nature, and they also have specific types of skills needed for those short-term engagements. So again, we're seeing just more of a shift towards that. Here are things that we're seeing in the market from a lot of these conversations. I would say, the data shows that almost every single group outsources at least some of their training. They all do. Now, some do more than others. Some, you see the shift of going in-house and outsourcing and then back in. Most of what we see is that groups prefer vendors over contractors. And the reason why is there's just that light project management that is involved there. But at the same time, then there's a lot of marking up for that project management. And so then that gets into costs and how you manage those. And so, I can't spend too much on my vendors. And it's a bit of a catch-22. So where we see things going is this need to scale up and down resources very quickly. Again, I just hear that all the time. I found about these initiatives yesterday. I need to get going. I just need to ramp up my team. But we also think that project management piece isn't going to go away. It's also very costly and hard to manage groups of contractors, particularly in larger initiatives. So there has to be some of that project management component. But examples of what we see right now in content conversion, for example, there might be just like loads and loads of PowerPoints that just have to get converted to online modules or something more engaging. Or there'll be, we see a lot of large projects for LMS transitions, for example, and there'll be huge amounts of content, and people will need a team of 20 instructional designers to come and do that. In terms of what we see for the categories, we really see outsourcing across the board, and some more than others, particularly in content development, is very, very outsourced, and a lot of facilitation. I'm not sure if that's consistent with others. And then we're starting to see some creeping up in areas like LMS support, rather than having some people full-time in those. But these are generally some of the major categories we're seeing.
Are there any other categories that you've been seeing that come to mind? Any other trends on that end? So we think we've hit them all. Yeah, just really interesting. So I think, how companies, we can really utilize this talent and how workers can contribute is really, can you move it along? By adding their, the value in a few different ways that we wanted to talk about. So the first one is by building relationships. And we've heard that again a lot today. So really, I think the old way we used to think about contractors and the talent there was that independent contractors were almost in a silo. And now let's bring them on, build internal relationships with their project team, with their coworkers. Sometimes people on the team are wondering, why are these contractors here? Are they going to take over my job? So making that all more transparent, but also giving them the empowerment to build relationships with your clients internally and externally to help keep them in the bigger picture and to keep them engaged as well. So this is something probably near and dear to a lot of our hearts around making the complex simple. And this is how they can be successful, is really taking out a lot of the legalese that we might see, specifically with our compliance training or some other training that we have to take year over year, and really calling out the key points and giving them the power to do that and influence stakeholders to agree with that. And that will result in more successful programs and also hopefully help resonate with what we really, really want our associates to walk away with, and giving them the tools to know where to go for their information. And then segment the audience. There's a lot of ways, maybe with the same topics that we have found. I know I saw this a lot at Fidelity, was really to break the same topic out for different audiences, really in 3 different ways. So you have your new hires who might need like privacy, identity theft training, a lot of those common topics, information protection, and they need the foundational and the context and the more robust training. But then you might also have your tenured associates, which is the biggest audience, maybe if they're there a year or more, that maybe just need a refresher, a reminder of what's changed and a reminder of where to go, but not every single point that we want to include that audit or legal might want us to include, but giving them the refreshers and the resources. And then finally, your executives. They need to know what they're responsible for, and probably taking a quick overview of the training on whatever device they're using, but also to know what associates are so they can answer any questions that may come down the pipeline. And then using current methods. We talked a lot about those today, just so important in bringing in the talent that has the skills and that power, whether it's, to build videos, to build different types of simulations or games. I think the point really being that a lot of employees expect companies to use the design and methods and the tools that they're using in their personal lives. So again, videos, podcasts, a lot of games and simulations and things like that. And to really keep up with that is a lot of work. And then just really building that structure around your program to make it successful. You can have a great design and a great course and great user feedback, but if you don't have a lot of the reporting and the completion tracking and having the materials ready in this regulatory environment that a lot of us can work in, then that can sort of give a not so favorable mark on the program. And that's another way to really make it successful in the view of everyone who's a stakeholder. So a little bit more on then just kind of leveraging talent and uncovering those skills. You'll see that a lot about engagement, making them and contractors and the talent feel part of the team and asking for their ideas, tapping into their rich experience in other industries and other sectors, bringing them together and being curious, not just focused on what they're here to contribute for, but what else they can do to maybe help you assess and to help them see if this is a fit even for a long term and to give them the opportunity to learn and grow, because this whole segment of independent talent really isn't going away anytime soon. And just to make note of that, I mean, everyone's working remote now, so the playing field is a little bit more level. So it can definitely, I think we just covered that one. Really, if there's other projects, I would just say where independent talent could help if you are able to do that and let your employees also have time to focus on their careers. Really important.
Cool. So here's some of our predictions, and let's see if they all turn out to be true, and you can hold us to them. Where we see things going is we see a lot of the need for fast off-the-shelf sourcing and modification. So people want 90% of the base content, but they want to modify the last 10%, and they want to do that really, really quickly. And so we see the marketplaces, the ways to do that and quickly find people who can modify that or quickly source the very best fit content, something in the future. We also see this Uber type model getting facilitators with very, very specific types of skill sets and specific geographies. We see that in our marketplace where we have an offsite and it's a leadership development facilitation project. And I need that person for 3 hours next Wednesday, and they have to be in these topics. And then we also see this need for productization of offerings. So giving talent and vendors the ability to do just that, productize that. So here's my 2-week workshop, or here's my 4-week workshop. Here's what I can do to add on to these services, or here's some content deliverables around that. That's about it from us.
Yeah, maybe in just a few more examples on that, just really quick. So I know we've seen some examples really where some independent talent teams have come in to maybe help with a lot of banks where they're going back to having customers and clients come in person and meet with them again, and giving them like a library of videos to help refresh their training, give them maybe some safety protocols and some assessments so that they feel that they're ready, or building platforms that have the opportunity to have cohorts with new hires who need to feel more engaged right from the beginning, and to help with the career mobility and the badging idea we heard earlier today for associates. So really, we're finding a lot that have these technology skills that can really help bring things to the next level in terms of engagement, transparency, and career mobility. So any other questions, any other thoughts? So I think a few things I know that we will, probably start to see in a different way is how a lot of workers, if they're going down this path, they are going to probably take 2 to 3 temporary jobs in the long term versus one traditional job. We may see a shift for a while along that line of less functional roles and jobs, but more sort of temporary jobs and more of different ways to attack the work there at hand. And employers are going to have a broader selection of both independent and employee talent because it's out there and they're just kind of mixing and blending it together. Joy, did you have a question? Okay.
Oh yeah. So the question, in case everyone didn't hear, was: do consultants on our platform travel to on-site versus remote? So yeah, the answer is yes. We see a whole bunch of different things. I'll give you an example. So we work with like a fast-growing startup, and they have factories in New Jersey, and they'll need people to come in there to revise the standing operating procedures. and those people need to come on site for a few weeks, and then other examples might be completely remote from that. So it just depends. Another one is a well-known fencing company in Indiana, and they'll need people in Indiana. So it happens you might have them in metropolitan regions or in lesser populated areas.
And then, Pete, my just follow-up question is, so in financial services, and I'll use specifically my example in the company.
Mhm.
So if I was to bring in an independent contractor, I've got to have them sign an NDA. So these individuals are not your employees, or are they? So when I'm having them sign an NDA, is it with your company, or is it a separate contract with a vendor?
Yeah, so through a platform like ours, we sign a master services agreement with a company, because typically procurement, as I'm sure everyone in this room has experienced, can be quite painful. And so how our platform works is we have one blanket agreement, and then all of the contractors fall under that agreement. So they're covered by whatever types of things might be in place, because like we have financial services requirements where they might have, we have financial services customers, and they might have to do drug and background checks, or before they get onboarded, they might have to do some financial services like disclosure types of things. So there's no insider trading, and et cetera, et cetera. So in the platform, we actually have ability to set new types of paperwork. So they sign additional NDAs or work IP assignment agreements, or these other types of procurement related needs.
Yeah, and right now, we're finding that the gig economy is growing about 15 times faster than the traditional job market, where a lot of people are just trying to balance everything in their lives.
Yeah, and we should have addressed this actually, because the benefit of working with independent contractors and freelancers and vendors is speed. But speed can be hampered by procurement if you don't have things to deal with that. That can be a real roadblock for companies.
I have one more question. There's a leading question, so not to put you on this. I think many of us in this room would love to work when we want to work, where we want to work, at the beach or at the mountains, or right, it would be great, right? My question is more of as you think about the future in the workforce, but most of us, and including myself, we then go to a corporate job because we need the benefits. And so what is just your view? It's not specific to your company, but just in the future, as you see the US landscape solving the benefits equation for the workforce?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a tricky one to navigate, because companies obviously are trying to navigate those costs. And we have 25 full-time employees with our own company, and when you have those types of people, right, there's a lot of associated costs with that. My personal standpoint is, you have to invest in your people, and these, and you're investing in that type of knowledge and in their culture, and all that for sure is totally important and worth the investment. But then if you might have short-term needs where you might have that flexibility. So for us, if we have short-term development needs, that might be better suited for outsourcing for us. But I don't think that means we should outsource all of our employees by any means. So I think it's something that can complement your strategy without taking out your people.
But you have seen in some other sectors, the independent contractors organizing and even looking at that. So we'll see. It's very interesting. They're getting a lot of, again, leverage right now, and can work to their advantage.
Cool. Thanks for your questions, Joy, and be sure to check us out. Happy to always chat about our business. We're some people call us the Match.com of LNT. Angie's List. There's other examples. But please say hi to me if you'd like to chat about that. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you much. Appreciate it, Colette. All right, awesome. We are in the final home stretch. And so do we have another presentation to put over? Awesome. Yeah, you ready? Come on up. I'm sorry. Oh, bring your laptop. Yeah, I think, can we switch out a laptop? Perfect. Yeah, we can get that set up. Come on up. All right. Well, awesome. So the last presentation for today, I get to welcome Camaria, and she is the Employee Experience Senior Manager at Accenture. And did we meet when you were with FIS? So yes, that's right. So previously with FIS. So welcome, Camaria. Yay.
I'm a walker, so I gotta pace while I do this. So just so you know, I do know that I am what's standing between you all and happy hour, or you all in room service and pajamas. So I will be bright, bold, brief, so we can all be gone. You have my word on that. All right? I got it. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to get the abridged version here. Okay, we're almost there. Almost there.
Yeah, it is.
That's
No, I'm sorry.
that's somebody else's.
That's somebody else's, yeah. Oh. Yeah.
All right. End of the day. All right, let's see if I can. Perfect. I'm back. All right. So as I mentioned, my name is Camaria Scott. I am with Accenture, but I have been to this conference now 5 years in a row, I think. So when I first met them, I was with FIS and I was in learning and development. So that is my background. I'm also an IO psychologist, but I love all things change, culture, transformation, and people. So I always wind all those things together. And so today I wanted to talk about transforming leaders for the future of work. And what's sort of nice about going last is that I've heard all kinds of great presentations, and there are elements of what I'm going to talk about that have been weaved into the other presentations. So I will gloss over those as to not to redo them. But if we're starting to think about, future of work, I think it's important to start with what is our perspective on what that looks like, right? We got to know what we're moving into. So a little bit about Accenture's view on future of work. So for the past, 2-ish years, we've all been home in our pajama bottoms, yoga pants, with our dogs, and we've enjoyed a certain level of flexibility. And I think that's the question that just came up as we were talking about contractors. And so when we think about our keys to the future of work and what we think is really paramount to that vision going forward, first and foremost, it is flexibility. 88% of our people have said that flexibility is the key to their productivity and their wellness and being able to balance those things. There's a wonderful case study on the Accenture website that talks about this a little bit. Now, Accenture has almost 700,000 employees. So we're big. And with that being said, we know that then our approach to flexibility is not one size fits all because we are big, we are vast, we exist over very large populations. And so we employ a decision framework that helps our leaders to decide what level of flexibility can happen in a role. And our kind of promise to our people is that there will be some level of flexibility in when, where, and how they work. The other part of that, though, is there is some level of in-person connection time that is meaningful. So when we think about building culture and we think about sort of that connectedness, that typically happens during moments where we're sharing space. Now, although technology is kind of helping us with that, if you think about some of the relationships you've probably built with your peers, it was that one time you went to dinner after that conference you went to that was a really long day, or that project that you worked on where you were in that room camped out for 3 days, working on your strategy. So there is value in in-person connection time, and we want to make sure that to some extent, everybody has a little bit of that. And then we want to make sure that we are still focusing on a human-led culture and omni-connected experience. If you're like me, you heard omni-connection, you're like, no, thank you, that sounds like on all the time. But what it really means is that you feel connected no matter when or where you are connecting from, that you always feel seen, safe, connected, and courageous, and that you always feel like you belong. So in the midst of everything, when people are in different places, when they're working different schedules, we want to make sure that everyone still feels connected to one another. So we know that getting here is the future, and that has implications for our leaders and what that means they will need to be able to do in order to be successful. So first and foremost, there is no pandemic playbook. We figured that part out, right? And sadly, there's also no post-pandemic playbook either. And so leaders who are leading for tomorrow have to be able to really think about what's possible and come at things from an experimentation mindset. What if we tried this? Let's give it a whirl. And then use technology, kind of like we saw a couple presentations ago, to figure out what that experience could be. They also have to be able to start to think for themselves about what they want for their teams and for their accounts, because it is not one size fits all. So we can't go to a specific account and say you have to do it this way, because the type of work that they do may require them to be in the office 5 days a week, and so their flexibility might be different than someone who might be in our TNO organization that has a little bit more flexibility. So the leader has to be able to really understand their vision and craft their own compelling vision of what that looks like. They also have to be able to really communicate that and connect the dots for people, because it's a great big mess out there trying to figure out what tomorrow looks like. And they have to be able to sort of paint that picture, but also build in empathy, because there are some people who will end up in a situation that's not their first choice. If you are doing something that is on-site for a client, you will probably have to be there 5 days a week. And so as a leader, we want them to be able to communicate that along with our promise to find some way for them to have flexibility. But even when we're dealing with clients, we still have to be able to say to them, we understand that maybe these are the flexibility options that you're offering to your people, but we'd like to uphold our promise to our people. So let's figure out how we can align so that both of our organizations can work together effectively. They also have to be problem solvers, because it's bumpy along the way. As we've talked about in a number of presentations as we're trying different things, we know that it's not always the first thing that we try, the first approach. That one time we tried to use the technology and it didn't work. So we want them to continue to leverage their expertise and their insights to find the pragmatic solutions that help them find their way forward. A couple more. They need to know what matters now more than ever. And so I love to use flexibility as an example, because when we talk about flexibility, it can mean a lot of things. So our colleagues in India travel very, very long distances to go to work. They often leave their homes of origin to go to a larger city, because that's where a lot of the industry is. And they're gone for long periods of time. So in that area, flexibility means not necessarily the remoteness of where they work, but us deciding to, instead of having one large building, we're now going closer to where our people live, and we're opening multiple locations. So they have the flexibility to stay where they live and also work, right? In the US, that could mean I'd like to go jogging when it's not dark outside, if I jogged. And so maybe I want the flexibility in my workday, right, to be able to stop at 10 o'clock and protect my gym time or my yoga time or whatever. So leaders need to be listening, because they need to get it right, because if you give someone the wrong thing, they're like, but you didn't give me what I asked for. So we want them to have that awareness of what that looks like and deeply understand what their people need and want to be successful. They've got to balance relationships and results. So the interesting thing about this new way of working is that back in the day, we would think about proximity bias as being that thing where, like, if your office was next to my office, you were my go-to person. In today's environment, proximity bias is I know you because we interact digitally more than anybody else, and I don't know other people. So they've got to be able to balance and be open to newer relationships and not just go to those trusted resources that they know is going to get it done. So we've got to have them have a little bit of openness and balancing those relationships and results to ensure that all people are heard, whether or not they're in the same physical room or if they're in a digital space. And then, yes, whoops, last but not least, they have to do it for themselves. So one of the things that we find and we think about leaders of the future is they have to be able to walk the walk and walk the talk for flexibility, well-being, caring for themselves as they care for the client, because whatever they are role modeling is going to cue to their teams whether or not we are really valuing that as an organization. So how do we make space for them? And I think someone said earlier today about making space for leaders to be able to balance the things that they need. So some of our leaders are already here. For others, it represents a change in how they were leading pre-pandemic. And if you do any change work, you know that it's not often the change that gets you, it's the transition. We can flip a switch all day long, but getting people from point A to point B is where a lot of us struggle, and that's where we do a lot of our good work. So this process has been kind of talked about a little bit throughout the day, but the way we approach transformation at Accenture is really by using a human-centered design experience design, which is based on design thinking. Any design thinking fans? Wonderful. So we all know, we may be familiar with this approach. What makes design thinking human-centered design is the extreme focus on the actual user and the person. And we're solving for that person and their experience rather than the solution. So we're looking at our leaders and we're saying, how can we help them be more successful? How can we iron out the friction in what we'd like for them to be able to do? In our describe phase there, we bring in all kinds of people to kind of help us think about the perspective of what do we need to build in order to help them be successful. So sometimes what we need to build is a training program, but sometimes what we need to build is a platform. So earlier, I think one of the questions that someone asked was, how do we help leaders share talent? And one of the ways we do that is by making skills more visible. Well, that's really not learning's job, right? Like, that's a technology platform, especially if you have 700,000 people. That's a technology platform, an HRS system like Workday that makes that happen, right? So it's what do we need to build in order to, from what we learned, in order to change the environment. And then we get to have a little bit of fun during a collaborative co-creation process of just figuring out how do we ideate the ideas of what we need to build? How do we then create something, a prototype? How do we fail fast? And then how do we evaluate it to make sure that it's achieving the goal that we said it was going to do to help our leaders to be successful? So I'm just going to go over kind of how we use this approach for a tiny little piece of our transformation project and helping our leaders to build that omni-connecting future and omni-connected experience and future of work. So when we start with the discover phase, we always start with a very rigorous research process where we are trying to understand the experience of our leaders before we start solving their problem. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. One is participant observation. You could do directed storytelling, where you simply ask them questions. Tell me about a time when you were trying to provide development options to your team, what happened? And they might say, well, I offered them training. Okay, well, tell me why. Well, that's the only thing I knew to do, right? And if you hear that enough times, you start to say to yourselves, we have an awareness issue. Our leaders don't have an awareness of all the different ways they can develop their teams. So storytelling helps you to kind of figure out themes of what you might be solving for. One of the ones that I really love to use is empathy mapping. And you may be familiar with this if you are in sales because they use this for personas. But empathy mapping really kind of gets to what is someone thinking, feeling, saying, doing, hearing, seeing, what might they want, what might they need or want. And this is illustrative of a conversation we had with our leaders when we were talking about leading change and people leadership around what were some of their challenges. And so this is super tiny, so I'll call out some of the things for you. But, we heard them say things like, we're overwhelmed with competing priorities that leave me stretched across too many things. So we said that we wanted them to be models, role models, right? But they're telling us they're struggling. The expectations of leadership behaviors don't match reality, especially in what gets rewarded. So they're telling us the structure around us is really not conducive to what you're asking us to do. I'm rewarded for these numbers, but you're asking me to focus on people, right? Down here at the bottom, what do they need or want? Clarity on what good looks like. So help me figure out what is it you're really asking me to do? I've maybe seen it on paper, you've written it down somewhere, you've said develop your people, but in real life, what does that actually even really mean? So when you use an approach like this, and this is done really nicely where you can bring in various leaders or whomever you're solving for and just let them fill this out themselves and then start to analyze it. What it does for you is it helps you to start thinking about what are some of the friction points or what are some of the things that are keeping them from being successful? Because sometimes it's a skill gap. Sometimes it is something we can solve with learning. But if you look around here, you see a bunch of things that are actually not learning related. And that's where we start thinking about enablement. How do we enable our leaders to be successful? So once you pick something, so you won't boil the ocean here, but you will kind of have conversation amongst yourselves around your leaders and maybe have them evaluate which one of these things, if we removed it for you, right, would help you go the furthest, the fastest. What would make the biggest difference in your ability to be a better people leader? And this is kind of a way that you can then start to say, this is what we would solve for. So once you do that, you move on to your next step where you sort of then talk through, well, what is all the data telling us? And then what are all the ways that we can actually start to solve for this problem? So there are a couple of methods that you can use. What you're really trying to ask yourself is, if we're going to create something, what is it and what is it going to do for us? So a couple of techniques, you could use how might we, and that's just really very simply asking yourself something like, how might we provide examples for our leaders so that they know what other leaders are doing? Or how might we make it easier for our leaders to identify the development options for their teams? So you kind of go through this ideation process without evaluation to just start rapidly going through the what are we solving for until you find the one that actually makes sense for your group. The one that I love is up here, and it's HILLS. And HILLS creates sort of the what experience are we trying to create? So when we think about what are we solving for, it's how will the person know that something is different? What's going to change for them as a result of the thing that we've created? And so you start with your who are you solving for? In our case, it's our leaders because they're at the center of what we're solving for. The what is, so what's going to change? What will they have that's different at the end, right? So they're going to have access to those inspirational and pragmatic examples because, again, we're solving for how do I know what good looks like? And then what's that going to do? Like, why would that even matter to them? It's going to help them bring that experience that we talked to for life for themselves and for their teams, right? So that's the wow experience. That's the why we're doing it. So anything that you create, I personally recommend using a HILL to kind of just answer, what are we solving for? How will people know that this thing is in place? A lot of times when we're in learning, our measure of success is we launched it, right? The training launched, the thing went out, but was anything really different for our end users or for our stakeholders? And so when you create something like a HILL, you're asking yourself, how are people going to know that we were successful? What's the difference in their experience going to be? So once you sort of land on something, what is that we're solving for, you start getting closer to then what is it that we want to build that's going to make this come to life for us? And so this is where I like to have all the good fun in the ideate, prototype, test phase. So this is really just general brainstorming where you want to start with a really divergent approach where you're letting various people kind of come up with ideas as to what you might create to solve for that experience. And then you can use an approach of dot voting or something that brings it all together so you can pick something. For us, one of the things that we picked was a podcast because We thought it was fun. We wanted to humanize the experience. We were really all tired of thought pieces. So we were really like, how can we create something digestible for our people? So one of the ways that you can kind of start to socialize that, because you don't want to create something that no one's going to use, is by a concept poster. And so what we started to do was kind of ideate what is that we thought we wanted to create, because we want to start building something that's testable with our end users. So for this idea for our podcast, we wanted to start off with, what do we think an episode that someone would listen to would look like? So our thoughts were, we first and foremost wanted an engaging host. There are 3 of us. And we wanted them to be able to build rapport and coax out of senior leaders, what are they actually doing? We wanted them to be able to open up and to talk about what worked well, what didn't work well. We wanted them to be a little bit funny because we wanted people to be able to want to listen to them. But we also wanted them to be able to really dive into the ambiguity of some of the things that we're asking of our people leaders. In terms of guests, we wanted to make sure that our guests were comfortable being candid and honest about their own experiences and their struggles. So one of our episodes really is about the struggle of being an MD and balancing all the priorities, because we wanted them to hear those struggles and work through ideas. And then we wanted to be able to provide them with pragmatic ideas or pragmatic examples of the way forward. So our concept poster here just lets other people visualize what we're talking about, and it lets us to start to socialize it with our target audience. Just check and see, like, would you even listen to this? Because we don't want to build something that they're not going to use and that's not going to solve for the experience that we want to create. The other thing that we do when we're building is we always include experience principles. This just helps to keep us honest. So when you're designing experience, you're going to want to connect the dots between what you said you were going to build and what are the elements of that experience that are going to help you to get there. So for us, we know that if we're helping them with future of work and omni-connection, that anything that we create and release has to be relevant to timelines in the organization. Meaning, if offices are opening in May, we don't want our return to office conversations happening in August. They need to happen before people actually go back to the office, so someone can say, oh, that's the way that I can talk to my people about it, right? So we want to always make sure we're timely. We want to be able to tell a connected story of how our cultural blocks come together. So one thing that we find that leaders struggle with, and your leaders might struggle with this as well, training says one thing, performance management says another thing. There's another group over here, compliance is another thing, and they're left to connect the dots on their own, which is confusing. So for us, for it to be practical and to help them, we have to connect the dots for them because we said we wanted them to be able to connect the dots as leaders. So there's a couple more here. We won't go through them all, but the key point is it's important that when you're building any sort of an intervention that you're really thoughtful about what it is you're creating, what you're solving for, and this just kind of keeps you honest in the process. So then you want to create a prototype. So that's Kevin up there. He was brave enough to be our first guest on the podcast. We sort of just randomly emailed him and said, will you do this thing with us? And he was like, sure. But the prototype is going to help you make sure that before you put out a final product, that you really have tested it to make sure that your end user finds it valuable and useful and will want to use it. And so once you kind of create that, there are methods that you can use to get feedback on the effectiveness of whatever your prototype happens to be. So you can use Well, Better, Next, Rosebud, Thorn, and these are really traditional design thinking techniques, so Google will always give them to you. But the one that we like is I Wish, I Wonder. And so in this process, we used I Like and I Wish just to get a feel for if we were creating something that was of value to our listeners. So under I Like, what we heard was they loved Kevin as much as we did. They really loved his authentic conversation and his willingness to talk about his experience growing up through the organization and why he was super passionate about being a good leader, because when he was an analyst, there was times when he didn't feel that way. They also liked hearing his practical examples of what he did with his team and how he worked with them so that he could go on vacation, going back to our walk the talk, right? And how he could ensure that they are developing as people on their team. They loved that it was easy to listen to, so we definitely made it sort of, they didn't have to go hunting for it. We tried to think about where it was going to be located. And they loved that they were funny. I paid no one to say that. That was all them. Right? So there were things that they liked. But then they also gave us some criticisms, right? Some critiques to help us make it better and to make it more of value to them. So things like make it shorter, like we get it, you think you're funny, but we don't have 45 minutes. Keep it under 30, sister. Draw them in quickly. So tell them why they're listening, tell them what they're going to hear. Make it easy. One person said to us, I'm not going to go to a website to find it. Like I need 3 clicks, right? And so we went through a whole process of figuring out how we mimicked real podcast behavior. Because if you use your iPhone or you use your Samsung, you probably can get to the episode of something you want to listen to in 3 clicks. So we went through an entire user experience to make sure that we could get to an episode in 3 clicks. Things like making segments shareable. So if there's a piece of advice in there that's super valuable, maybe I don't want to share the whole episode. I want to share just that 5 minutes to somebody as an example of something they could try. So going through this process helped us to think about what are we solving for? What pain point are we alleviating for our leaders? In this example, it is just help me know what good looks like so that I can start to do that and give me a couple of practical examples that I can put in place really simply. So last step is bring it to life. And we did that pretty easily. What I love is that we continue to release episodes. So Omni Connection, wait, what is that? As a nod to the fact that no one in our organization knew what Omni Connection was. So we wanted to introduce it. Don't freak out. The rest of that says explaining flexibility to your clients and teams, really helping them to talk through some of the topics that we want them to be discussing as they move forward. Courage the Two-Way Street is really about giving feedback and creating psychological safety in the organization so people can tell you what they need and what it's not working. Across our future work endeavors, we use this same approach with everything that we do. It's a hallmark of how we work. So earlier I read an example where people were like, well, but our evaluation system does not match what you're asking us to do. So we use this approach to actually revamp our leader evaluation system. We used it to create playbooks that people could take, our account leaders could take to their clients and talk about a perspective on flexibility and future of work. We used it to create leader workshops to help them craft their visions and to help them think through what the future of work and flexibility could be for their specific work groups, and to create additional assets for conversations they need to be had or thinking about how they manage hybrid work. And then last, we used it for digital front door. So I love the technology example that we had earlier because that's a huge one. So we use it to be thinking about the technology and digital experience we create for our hybrid teams as well. So this is a very big part of how we work across our entire transformation process. And I think it's something that if you're not using it for your transformation process, give it a try and you will like it. I'm on time.
Thank you so much. And we'll grab you at the break here for any questions. So. Awesome. Does that sound good, listeners? Burning question for
Where? Question. So the podcast is hosted internally on the Media Exchange. It's also linked through Yammer because Yammer has an app. If Microsoft has taken over your life too, you do have a Yammer app that you can download, and then you can create your own stream for the podcast that they can pin. And so as the owners, you can send out an announcement, which is a push notification that just says the new episode is available, and then they can get it that way, and it'll take them automatically to the Media Exchange as well. You're welcome. Other questions? If you think of anything later, you can email me.
Excellent. So wrapping up our time just with a couple logistics things. So again, we have some drinks next door. And then tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., we'll have a continental breakfast available. We're going to kick off at 7:55 sharp. So please, somewhere in there, show up. That'd be great. And then feel free to bring your luggage in the morning if it's easier to sort of have it here so that you don't have to find time during the break to go check out. If you want to check out early, leave your bag here. We'll be here all morning till 12:30 is when we wrap up. And last call to be sure to check in on your evaluations and keep that current so that we'll have that for tomorrow. Shereen, anything else before we? Great. Awesome. Thank you. See you guys next door or tomorrow morning, whichever.
Survive? Survived? You survived? I'm with you. You'll be here tomorrow?